Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 53 of Stat Check. This episode is titled WTC 2023 Recap. I am Innes, and I'm joined by Jeremy and Nathan. Anthony is on holiday in Iceland today and is having a wonderful time. I'll not spoil his news for him, he can do it when he's back. But I hope everybody is having a wonderful 2 weeks, enjoyed the week without us, had a great time at WTC War Masters or any other events you were at, and is looking forward to us getting into it because all three of us were there. All three of us had a great time. I'm sure Anthony, Tim, and Typhus will all share their experiences at separate occasions whenever they get a chance on the network. But you can best believe that given how much of a stellar event it was, that none of us will want to shut about it for the foreseeable future. So you can imagine that this will probably turn into a multi-week coverage of what the event was like. And it's only, as Jeremy is so cruel to remind us, exactly 51 weeks today until the next WTC starts on the 6th of August. So, without further ado, how are you guys doing? How was your event? Are you having a good time?
That was the most soothing radio voice-esque intro I've ever heard in my entire life. And major kudos to Innes that apparently the exhaustion and fatigue of WTC has apparently made him a radio personality from professional radio.
My voice is just so screwed up that I can't really go above this level of voice at the moment.
All we really needed to do all along to make unscuffed intros was have Innes lose his voice, apparently. I don't know. My flight home was unscuffed and had no problems, so I got just a direct flight home without any issues. Took the train from Mechlin to Brussels with TJ and Fox, and then saw Eric Forsman of Team USA on my airplane back to Chicago. I don't know. It's hard to figure out a way to start talking about the WTC in the last week of stuff, because there's like
we'll probably do it something like chronologically. That seems like the easiest way to do it.
So
let's
Jeremy,
go with the simple questions. Nathan, this was your first WTC. Did you have fun?
Oh, it's fucking blast. I think the coaches got used to me just walking around and like making eyebrow waggles at them to get information. I would walk by like Denise, the coach for Team Australia, and just like waggle my eyebrows at him, and he'd look at me and he'd either waggle them back or not waggle them back, depending on how they were doing.
Denise is a gem. I love seeing him every year.
And then the coach for Luxembourg came up with a signal where if they were doing poorly, he'd crawl under a table and rock back and forth crying. Unfortunately for the Luxembourg...
Is that a signal or just what he was doing and you interpreted it as a signal?
So it was a signal because he told me he'd do it. Unfortunately, he did it quite a bit over the weekend because Team Luxembourg was having kind of a rough go of WTC. Despite Thierry and their coach being just amazing people, they were the only two members of Team Luxembourg I got to talk to, though. So yeah, WTC 13 out of 10 would do again. I'm planning to do again.
You will be doing it again. You don't have a choice.
Yeah, I've been told already in our backstage chat that I don't have
I already voluntold you for Tom Neal and the chat, so you'll be back.
It was also funny because Neil was like, yeah, just talk to the stat check people when you get home, figure out if they want to send you back again. And I was like, I don't know if you've ever seen our backstage chat, but if they get like one good review and they think that I did an okay job, I'll come back.
Money well spent sending Nathan to the WTC, I will say that.
Oh, for sure. Just for the look on his face when he had to realize he had to play War Masters with down 35 models.
I'll tell that story eventually. We'll tell it during the War Masters portion. I had a lovely experience. I think if you can go to WTC, even as a non-playing person, like just hanging around for a day or two is an amazing idea. You can meet like all the coaches, like all the players. During downtime, you can say hi to anybody. During game time, you can still say hi to coaches, but you should like wave at them first to make sure that they're not like dying between things.
I know of at least two people who attended just to do War Masters who got adopted into other roles because they were there. In TJ and Tom Crayford. So
TJ definitely volunteered himself into a role, I think, not knowing what to expect.
I guess I'll run the shop. And Tom, we just kind of were like, hey, you're coaching us now. We just kind of grabbed him by the neck. We're like, we have a spare player card because a guy got chickenpox. Here you go. You're us now.
Oh, Ben. Yeah, I talked to Tom. Yeah, Ben McJurek.
The most Scottish Scotsman who was present for the Scottish national team.
we'll get to that as well. So, very quick, Jeremy, how was your travel home? I'll cover mine, and then we'll do the week. Then I'll run through what this breakdown of the show is going to be for everybody at home.
Long but uneventful, which was good. I got home in one piece. I said hi to my cats. I hugged my wife after I had not having seen her over a week, and it was all lovely. And then I slept for, I don't know, somewhere between 13 and 17 hours. I lost track.
It's pretty good. I think I did the same. I got home and it was like it was like shower, bed. I will say I have the wonderful pleasure of, because I booked the direct flight from Brussels airport rather than Brussels Charleroi, the south one. I left my hotel at 10:40, was back at home by 5 p.m. It was magical.
I was also home by 5 p.m.
Yeah, but you time travel. It's not quite the same.
Yeah, I was home before 4 o'clock my time.
I got the best part was that it took me so much less time to get through so many more people in passport control in Chicago than anywhere else. Line comparable length, but it took me way less time because apparently, never mind. We won't talk about that. That was the only travel problem, not the only travel problem I had getting to Brussels, or rather. It's a fucking disaster. Anthony told me he's never.
You made it to the event.
I did, and I got back on time. Actually, early even. It was great.
There you go.
So, Innes, how are we going to structure this fucking nonsense?
So, the way we're going to very broadly structure this is we're going to start by doing the last 2 weeks in stats because we missed last week. People like to know what the meta is going on. I can tell you in advance that it's the same dumpster fire it's always been because nothing's changed. But we're going to do it with like the level of vim and vigor that you've always expected from StatCheck, which is to say functionally none.
Vim and vigor it is. All right.
Then we're going to do the WTC coverage in probably 3 steps. We're going to cover the War Masters because all 3 of us played in it. We're going to cover the main event and the coverage side of the main event for Nathan. And then we're going to cover the social side. Then we'll do the plugs. And then we'll do show questions. We're going to try and keep this to the usual tight 90. I say tight 90 in like any way, shape, or form, referring to the fact that we have never finished a show in 90 minutes. We're going to try and stop this from going to the point where I have to hold my eyelids open with match decks. That's basically the point that we're getting at here.
We heard the cat for the first time on Jeremy's stream.
We hope you're all on board for the ride. WTC is a nightmare hellscape of a week that is the best week of my life. The reason I schedule my calendar the way I do. I wouldn't replace it for the world. And if I'm ever not back playing, I'll be back reffing. But oh my god, I'm so tired.
Let's kick into the stats then, shall we?
Let's just go in. All right, so
I can mute and sleep for 5 minutes.
So, like Innes said, I'm gonna blast through 2 weeks of stats because I don't give a fuck. And
also, I will add a caveat to this. I have done the stats for the last 2 weeks. I have not finished faction checks because I slept for somewhere between 13 and 17 hours. When the dashboard is updated in a few days' time, everything will be fixed. But
yep.
Caveat that some numbers might differ slightly from whatever you end up seeing on the dashboard.
Assume that everything is plus or minus 3%. There you go. All right. Ready, folks? Plus or minus 3%. Unsurprisingly, I'm just going to sum the 2 weeks of stats together because I don't give any shits about the numbers, really. Also, as a cool advertisement piece, we will at some point be going through the stats for the teams event. We got really cool stats from talking to Diffie from Best Coast Pairings, who gave me stats over the course of the teams event. So at some point, Cliff, Jeremy, and I are going to go through those, and then we'll probably do a piece of bonus content on them for patrons, or maybe for everybody. I don't know yet. I haven't decided. But as soon as we know that we're going to do that, we'll probably do that within the next week while the stats are still fresh and people still care. And do kind of an editorial about some stuff. I already have thoughts on it, but many people were already told those thoughts while I drank beer. But stats for the last 2 weeks. Eldar, 65% win rate, technically 64.9. Make up nearly 12% of the meta. They won 5 events over the last 2 weeks. They 18 top 4s over the last 2 weeks. 31 top 10s, an overrep of 2.5, just because somebody needed that in their lives. Gene Stealer Colts aren't really that far behind them at 64.5% win rate. 6.4%, which is probably the most Gene Stealer Colts players we're ever going to see and ever will see in the entire past, present, and future of GW. They also won 5 events. They had 9 top 4s and 16 top 10s for an overall overrep of only 2.33. Yeah. So that's the top end. there were 5 other GT wins by 5 other factions over those 2 weeks. So 5 other factions. Every other faction, not Eldar or Craft World Eldar, together
Just to
got the
confirm,
same number of
how
GT
many-
wins
how many
as
events?
Eldar, or
15 events.
15 events.
And 5 of them weren't GSC and Eldar.
Yeah.
Correct.
1/3
And
of them were
each-
won by Eldar. 1/3 of them were won by GSC, and the other third were won by 5 different factions.
Yep. 1/3 won by everybody fucking else, buddy.
Which is Necrons, Thousand Suns, Chaos Space Marines, Tyranids, and Space Marines. Technically Death Watch, I believe.
It was Death Watch, yeah. I can already see that there has been a little bit of minor not faction checking in here.
I blame Mikey.
It's okay. We'll fix it later. But yeah, so the meta is still kind of fucked up, guys. I will give you a preview and a hint, as it were, into some of the team stats which have pairings, like so people can pair you, but without the mirror removed, Eldar won about 75% of their matchups. With the mirror removed, it's probably like
Somewhere in the 80s.
like
Mhm.
80 something.
And that's including draws.
Yeah, that's withdraws, and that includes people occasionally just fucking up Eldar's day through dice, essentially. Or
Or like
Liam
building the hardest skew. I only ever play Eldar. This list is designed to be Eldar. And you just give them like the mirror or this, and they're like, well, I guess we'll take the other one. And then they're wrong, and then they get smashed.
Or
Which
that
is
might
like-
when someone oopsies into GSC.
Or Liam Hackett wraps an entire Eldar army in the center with a Necron warrior blob, and they never get to move or shoot ever again.
Yeah. Or, there's like
But
4 fail conditions out of a billion games. So, maybe don't lean too hard on that being a counter, guys. You're not going to play Necrons as well as Liam Hackett does. I'm sorry.
But in better news, or at least Jeremy, I think you have a better news piece to addend at the end of this, maybe.
I don't know if it's better news, but one of the things that we did find was when I was going through the numbers is that if you take War Masters, which was a 284 person super major, out of the stats, then let me very quickly pull these numbers. So without it, the last 2 weeks of stats, 65% for Eldar, 65% for GW for them. If you take War Masters out, that actually jumps up to 69% for GSC and 66% for Eldari. So apparently War Masters, where you have the top end players all playing, in theory, the best that they can, you drop Gene Stealer Cult win rate by about 5%.
Yeah, I think GSC got found out pretty hard this weekend is probably one of my biggest takeaways from the event.
They still did pretty well overall in the numbers, but they did have a real bad day compared to singles. There's a big differential in statistics.
Yeah, I mean, like out of a
singles
potential
and teams there.
Yeah, I think GSC went like 2-1-4 into us as a team. And I think Team America said they went like 1-6 into them, things like that. Like GSC are
6
very
losses and 1 draw into America.
Yeah. If you're planning for it, you very clearly can beat GSC. There are definitely things that beat them in the meta, and if they caught even the smallest nerf, I think that they're
now.
going
What
to
I
be
also
at the
want to
top of
look
the
at
meta
is the round by round win rate for GSC at that event, which I'll look at when I do a deeper dive later. Because one of the most hilarious things was mission 3 of War Masters was Ritual plus Scrambler Fields, which when I played my GSC on that, I was like, so I can't take an objective for the entire game against Custodes because you will just make it sticky and walk off.
Yep.
And I can't drop on it, and I can't walk on it without you just blowing me
I
up.
played against Knights in that mission, and we both forgot it was a rule.
So, just as an aside, for wins, so I went through the win-loss data for GSC after round like 6, or through round 6 basically, and they were at a 54% win rate. So respectable.
This
Definitely,
is for the WTC, not War Masters.
This
right?
is for teams by itself. So 54%, which is the largest drop of any faction aside from Tau, but we'll talk about Tau some other time. They on average though only scored a 10.7, which is a 10 to an 11 basically. So they on average scored a draw or an 11-9, which isn't great considering that GSC are one of the top most singles factions at the moment, right?
Yeah, I think our GSC averaged a 12 when I took Croatia out of our pairings because the Croatia round was very weird for us.
Yeah. So like we're going to talk about this more in like before a whole week, essentially. Probably next week is probably when we'll talk about it.
We need some time to process the numbers.
And like to decide how we're going to split it and stuff like that. I think we're going to split a few different ways, probably by seeding, also by phases of WTC, and look at how all those things change these numbers, because there are definitely some situations like the US into Cyprus where some of the numbers can get a little skewy because of it, which is worth taking into account when you're doing some of this stuff. I don't even think anybody took leagues at
they're talking about just in general. No, there were no leagues, there were no world leaders, and there were no Death Guard.
There were at
the
War
teams event.
Masters.
At the teams event. At War Masters, there was one Death Guard player.
One Death Guard, there was a Votan at least. Like, there was definitely a few.
Remember, so there was a 31.2% win rate over the last 2 weeks in GT.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say, actually, as well as 31.2% for them. It is still making them the worst faction, just under Drukari, who are at 34%. They both have about the same play rate. They both had just slightly over a dozen players. So they're not doing too great. There's a whole slew of the meta that needs some assistance. Yeah,
I also want to point out one of the interesting
14 factions.
And this is probably heavily skewed by War Masters, so I'd have to take that out again, because War Masters was a very weird event from a meta perspective. Marines are dropping considerably in play percentage. They're down to 14% of the meta when they were at like 19% for the last few weeks.
Is that summing all of them
That's
together?
putting all of them together, yeah, in the second tab.
14% is low. Like,
if you look
relatively speaking, yeah.
If you look at the full data set that we have, they're like 18%.
Yeah, and usually we're used to them being around
2 weeks.
20 to 25% realistically.
That was the end of that was the end of ARCs. ARCs was when they were getting into the 20s. Historically, they're between 15 and 20%.
Yeah, I just always remember them being around 20%. It's just kind of where they've sat.
Yep. But yeah, Eldari are still at 12% of the meta, so we might actually see, until there's an adjustment, Eldari pass Space Marines if that trend continues.
I mean, it does help that you only need to collect like maybe 30 miniatures for an Eldar army at this point.
Yeah, but so many of them are ancient.
Yeah, well, I mean, some of them are Forge World, but some of them are very easy to acquire. We're not going to talk about probably too much more than that to answer Sam. We probably won't talk about some of the weird proxies and situations like that. We'll talk about my proxy situation, which is an entirely different set of circumstances.
I will actually address this very quickly with Croatia. We identified early on in our round that they were using quite a few not WYSIWYG or proxy models, and we just let it slide. We didn't really feel like making an issue out of it during the first round. We let other teams do that. We were more just interested in playing out our first game and making the most of it.
Elo Woozle, that actually might be something worth tracking. We do have player names. We can see them when they switch factions dramatically, but it's worth also noting that it's better to use that as like if it's consistent over time and not like a week-to-week thing. You want to see if that player population like slides for multiple weeks into another collection before making a decision about where those players are going. Because some people who play a lot of competitive 40K have access to 6 or 7 or 8 or all the factions if they need to. So it's worth waiting to take a look to see how that population swerves and if it's consistent. Right, now that you're all depressed, maybe 2 weeks from now, GW will fix everything. There you go. Or a month from now, rather, because it's only mid-August.
I definitely believe you, Nathan. Definitely believe you.
We can all believe me. It's a
Strong,
terrible
but
idea.
not dominant, really. Nathan.
Man, I just felt like a surge of adrenaline. My adrenal cortex system may be mostly broken, but it still managed to just squeak out a surge right there to wake me up a little bit more. Thanks, buddy.
Just like, how dare you? How dare you say such a thing?
All right.
How dare
Shall
you
we
say
kick
the
off
thing that made
the event discussion? Because I think stats, nothing has really changed.
Let's do it. How did everybody feel about War Masters? How did we all do?
I guess I'll start.
Go for it.
Nathan, will go to you last because your story is the most amusing.
It is definitely the funniest.
So I'll be honest, I talked about this beforehand on the show. I had no idea what I wanted to play going into War Masters. It was like a month before list sub, and I hadn't hobbied in like 2 months. So I just basically asked my team, all right, who isn't playing War Masters and can I borrow your army? And that ended up being our GSC player, Riley Tremblay, who very wisely decided to not play War Masters and just play the main team event. So I borrowed his army. It was the pretty bog standard GSC build with the Aberrant Brick. I had fun. I lost my first game at Imperial Knights on a misplay battle round 2, and then from there I just kind of faffed about. I beat Marines twice. I lost to Custodes. I beat Knights the second time around. I played Air from the Iceland team in a absolutely stupid game where this was round 5, I think, at this point, and I said, I don't care what happens. I'm putting my Aberrants 9 inches away from Canis Rex. If I go first, I end the game turn 1. If I go second, we'll play a game. And I rolled the 6 to go first. And killed Canis, and Canis killed 5 Aberrants back, and then the game ended turn 2. And then I had played a wonderful game into Florian from Team Netherlands into his T-Sons. It was round 6 of the event, and we were both very, very tired. So there were many moments where we both just said, okay, let's take a moment, pause, collect our thoughts. Do you want a Red Bull to try to get through the round maybe, or something along those lines? And we played to, I think it was actually a points draw even, but it was definitely a WTC draw. And yeah, Florian was absolutely wonderful to play. I was very happy.
Florian's lovely.
Oh, he's like we've talked in the past, but we had never had the opportunity to play. Our teams played last year. Our teams played again this year. But yeah, I finished with 3 wins, 2 losses, and a draw. So the perfect 3-2-1 record. The most notable part of this is I finished in the exact same position as I did last year. I finished 74th, except last year was 74th out of like 150 people. This time I was 74th out of like 280 people. So I went up a win. I went up 18 differential points over 6 games compared to last year, but I finished in the exact same spot. So I'm kind of hoping next year I can break that and finish above that point.
I mean,
that was my honest. I had fun.
Request.
I had considered dropping after day 1 because I was 1 and 2 and not particularly enjoying myself. Like my last 2 games had been fun. My round 3, I played into the French Custodes player Benjamin. He was an absolute charm to play. He kicked my ass in on Ritual with Scrambler Fields because I couldn't take an objective in no man's land to save my life. But yeah, I decided to play it out. Most notably because Riley was watching all of my games. And also Patrick Woods, the Norwegian captain, was watching all of my games too. And it was only on round 5 that he realized that I wasn't our team's GSC player. He was like, oh, so me watching really isn't helping. I was like, no, I don't play this how Riley plays this at all because I have no idea what I'm doing. I had 3 games of GSC before I came to this event. It was
disinformation campaign, baby.
Oh, 100%. There were definitely times after each game when Riley would be like, so why'd you do that? Or why'd you do your allocation like that? I was like, seemed interesting. Seemed like it'd be fun.
It seemed like the right idea.
I don't really know what I'm doing here. I'm just kind of throwing dice and hoping that I kill models. But yeah, that was me. Innes, how was your War Masters?
So my War Masters was significantly better than I expected it to be. I was basically going in with the expectation that I'm playing Deathwing. This is my team's list. It's intended to, duck and weave, dodge the Eldar matchup during pairings process, and then beat most of the rest. And instead, I decided to just carry that energy straight forward. And it was like I had the hand of the WTC gods pairing for me. So I managed to dodge Eldar for 6 rounds. It was great. So I managed to play. So unfortunately, we had arranged a pickup with Brian for the tournament. And the tournament was be at the venue for half 8, pairings are at half 8. Round starts at 9. Now I'm looking at things like, it said pairings are at 9. We'll be fine if we're a few minutes late. But I would still like to be there early. I hate being late. I despise it in all things. I would rather be like 4 hours early than 3 minutes late. But Brian does not share this energy. Now I love you, Brian, but you were not prepared for that early. Brian had lost the car ticket. It took us ages to get to the car park. It was awful. So I ended up pairing late into my teammate Ricky, who was also in that car with me because there was no one else to play. So I'm very thankful that we got to continue playing the War Masters. I'm very thankful to Brian for taking us there in the first place because that walk was not pleasant. But it would have been nice to play somebody besides my teammate. But I played Ricky and his Gene Cults. Ricky was exceedingly hungover from the night before, and I won that game 19-1. Then I played into something else. Oh my god, this is bad.
You want me to pull up your pairings for you?
I've played too many games of Warhammer this week, Jeremy. I've played 14 games of 40k. It was too many.
Yeah, especially since you only planned on playing 13.
I played against the Norwegian Demons list, who had a really bad time in deploy service calls of going first, realizing that he couldn't interact with Desolation Marines that were stood in the open. And I went, okay, so I'll advance and shoot them, ran them directly at his Bloodthirster, blew it up, put the rest of my army in front of them. He dropped in behind that, ran into his Bellicor aura again, blew up Shellac City. I'm just like, I'm coming at you, bro. I don't know what you're doing. I need to get you off these objectives while the Deathwing Knights just crushed the other flank. So I managed to hold my own going second in service calls there, which was nice. That was a 15-5. Then I played Dimitri Henry on stream for Wargames Live, where he played Knights, and we both collectively looked at the Wargames Live software and went, I'm not dealing with character cards and the things. We played fixed secondaries, and that ended up working very well for me, but not for my opponent, who scored a grand total of 6 on secondaries. That was it was a really good game though. Just running at Knights with hammers, being like, "Stay still so I can smack you." I then played Jules Champion from the French team and his Chaos Space Marines, where I managed to perform the ultimate psych out of informing him that he did not know what was in his WTC list and he had submitted it wrong. He had intended to have two undivided Forge Fiends and one Nurgle one, and instead had submitted 3 undivided ones, which meant he didn't have one he could start on the board, which he found out in Game 4 of War Masters.
Oh no!
So that was an interesting game where I believe I won the psychological edge immediately. So I won that one 55. I then played Lucas Wobak, who is one of the Team Austria players. I won this game 11-9. Very, very tight game. I actually had to win this one twice because I didn't play my turn 5 because we looked at it and we're like, we counted the score. And it was like I was winning by either 6 or 9 points, depending on whether I did a card or not. So I just stopped. I was like, cool, we'll just not play it. And then I came back 10 minutes later, and one of the Austrians grabbed me and was like, hey, you need to come back. And I'm like, missed a secondary here. And I'm like, okay, cool, I'm going to play my turn 5 then. So I then played my turn 5 and won the game again. It's like, okay, cool. But you're right, I did have to actually play my turn 5, but it was funny to win a game twice, I will say. Then I played Alexander Sacco of the Belgian team and his Chaos Space Marines. This was on the French War Games stream. This was a super cool game. I was not expecting his list to play the way it did. He played it very, very well. And he actually asked me to concede on turn 4. And I looked at him and I was like, ran the math. I'm like, if I draw a 5-point secondary card, don't we exactly draw? And it was like deer in headlights. He was like, oh no. And then flipped the 5-point secondary card, scored the homers in his deployment zone. 10-10, which then propelled both of us directly into the shadow round, where I proceeded to get smashed in 40 minutes because Duck and Weave works until it doesn't.
Duck and Weave works until what, 5 of the 7 top are Eldari?
If I had gone first, there was play there because basically the premise of my list is Deathwing Knights that advance in charge. When you lose to a Night Spinner, that doesn't work. But you start the Deathwing Knights off the board, they have to start all their reserves off the board because I have Desolation Marines, which means that if I go first, I get to try and hit a 9-inch rollable charge onto something that matters with the Deathwing Knights. And I can stage it so that only one of them can Phantasm away. I get a turn of Desolation damage. Like, there's a game there. Said I went second, and then all his screens came down before I could do that. And I dropped Death and Nuts in the objective and I got 19-1. But there's a game there if you go first. The Dark Angels definitely could have played that. I definitely didn't say that to Quentin. I definitely said, well, I think me going second gives me a chance here. I was like, I've just lost this game. Cool. But it's much funnier to do it the other way around because you can maybe try and psych them out into playing it wrong. But Quentin's far too good for that. So Quentin ended up finishing 3rd. And then we had Fred Otto finished 2nd with Eldar, and Thomas Wobak finished 1st, also with Eldar. My round 6 opponent, Alexander Sacco, finished 4th. So congratulations to all them. I did, in fact, finish 5th in the War Masters, which is the best I've done. I think I've done like 20th and then 17th and now 5th, I think, are my War Masters over the last 3 years of doing it. Can't complain. It's even across 3 editions now.
1 per edition?
Yep, so far. We only had one in 9th edition, right? So
see you in 11th?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not allowed to play the 10th. I'm not allowed to play any more 10th edition ones. I want to keep going up. I've got to keep playing in a new edition.
Fair. So I guess we could talk,
Nathan.
We want to talk about my War Masters experience.
Yes.
Sure. So I played Death Watch. David Gaylord of Team New Zealand lent me his army. So I played his list, which was 35 Death Watch veterans, Proteus kill team with missile launchers, a couple infiltrator squads, an Inceptor squad with plasma guns, Desolation squad, and some other nonsense, basically. Just a pretty standard Death Watch list, except for the missile launchers, which are slightly like off meta as choices go. It was I played like a few practice games with it. David sat down with me one day on TTS and kind of gave me a basic run through on how to play it. My first round opponent was a World Eaters player who was at their very first competitive 40K event with a non-competitive World Eaters list. And I put them in the ground 20-0. Like just all the way in the ground.
Monster.
They had a great time. I introduced them to Anthony. It's like, this is the person that you should talk to instead of me about getting to play better. Especially if you want to play World Eaters or aggressive armies. It's not me. Don't talk to me about this, please. And then I was pretty convinced and was that I was going to get paired into a good player next. And so I got paired into, well, I said, I'm going to get paired into a WTC team captain next. And lo and behold, my second round opponent was a WTC teams captain, I believe. That was the second round, or was that the third round?
Who was it? We can tell you.
I'm just gonna pull.
It was Patrick Woods.
Yes,
I played the
Captain
Norwegian
Team
team
Norway.
captain.
Yeah,
Okay,
the one who
yeah.
followed me around day 2.
Yeah, so that I think I got paired into him in the second round, and I lost a squeaker on Servo Skulls because I'd never played Servo Skulls before, and if I'd played Servo Skulls before, I probably would have done a better job. But while playing Patrick, I killed like 6,000 points worth of Gene Stealer Colt, and was winning until turn 5 when I finally ran out of resources to keep him from putting Servo Skulls into my deployment zone, and he beat me 11-9 because I made a couple errors in teleportation. But I also got to meet the nicest group of people on the entire planet because I played him. Team Norway gave me a yoga mat. They offered to have their physio give me like a foot massage when they got there to help me out with my feet and stuff like that. I never took them up on that particular part, but
Should have.
they were the nicest people. I have a jersey from them. They were also very tall people, so the jersey like makes me look like a child. But yeah, I got to meet them. I got to see them every morning for breakfast. Patrick Woods was a gentleman and a scholar to play against, and I lost 11-9 in round 2. And then in round 3, I played against the Team Iceland Deathwatch player, which, as somebody who has not played much Deathwatch in the first place, was kind of like, oh, cool. I'm going to play a teams player, and they're going to put me on the ground. Instead, I put them in the ground, which was kind of novel. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put my Desolation Marines on the table at the back, and if I go first, I'm going to pop Kraken. I'm going to pick up their Desolation Marines. And they deployed theirs just 36 inches away from mine. I popped Kraken rounds, oathed the Desolation Marine squad, and picked them up right away. And then the game was basically me chasing them around the table for the rest of it, and I won. I think I got a high win out of that one. It was fine.
Yeah,
So
going first helps a lot
17-3.
in Deathwatch, remember?
What?
Going
17-3.
first helps a lot.
17-3, there it was, yeah. Going first and being like, fuck it. If I go first, I'm going to do real great. Sounded like a good choice to me.
It's very hard to outrange the other person's Desos when they can move and shoot with
Yes.
plus stick range. There's also the option that if that doesn't work as well, you can go Dragonfire and just try and hit the advance.
It's true.
But
I went for what I thought I could. Being able to like turn off cover, getting plunging fire because of those ruins also is hilariously good with Desolation Marines. Hey, look, AP2 Desos. Whee!
AP3 ignores cover Vanguard launchers. This is just a Night Spinner.
Yeah, I totally forgot they were AP3 on the Vanguard launchers. Oopsie doodles. Whatever. Wouldn't have made a difference. It would have made a difference in my 4th game matchup. But in the 4th round, I played Florian. And 1,000 Suns. Yeah.
No, did you guys share Florian?
We did. I played Florian. And I was starting to run out of brain cells because I had like 10 hours of travel delays and had not slept basically at all. So I made a couple early mistakes into 1,000 Suns. I was actually doing pretty well going first in the trading game. I took half of Magnus's wounds off in one round of fire from Desolation Marines. If I'd remembered that the Vanguard launcher was AP3, I probably would have taken off actually about 4 more wounds off of him. Such as
Why would
life.
AP3 matter into Magnus, who's a 2-up armor save with a 4 invulnerable save and ignores cover?
Oh, you're right. I guess it wouldn't have made a difference. Maybe it would have. I don't know. Doesn't matter. But that was fine. Took 8 wounds off of him. Sent my Proteus kill team forward because I thought I needed to go pretty aggressive. Tried to roll a high charge to get him into the changeling and the rubric unit behind him. After the changeling had turned off their shooting in the shooting phase before, I didn't get to pick up a bunch of stragglers that I meant to use their shooting to pick up. I also was hopefully going to use some missile launchers to pick off a little bit more off of Magnus if I could. They charged the changeling, didn't roll particularly high, and then they failed their battle shock test against the changeling, and then they sat there twiddling their fucking thumbs in the open in front of Magnus. And actually, in spite of that, they still managed to live through far more firepower than I thought they were going to. But it was at that point that I'd seen one judge come by and stare at my models and then walk off into the distance. And then 2 judges stopped at the table while I was trying to come to put together some semblance of like a response plan after losing my Proteus kill team and a Deathwatch veteran squad to Flamers, after not being able to pick up essentially 2 rubric squads and leaving the sorcerers essentially hanging around, which was a different problem that we won't talk about. But they came over and they said, Nathan, is this your army? And I was like, yeah. It's like, these Deathwatch veterans don't have backpacks. And I looked at them and I was like, are they supposed to have backpacks? Because at this point, I was like barely scraping brain cells together, and fuck if I know what a Deathwatch veteran looks like, to be totally honest.
It's not like you have a Marine army.
So wonderful defense, Nathan. I'm very proud of you for coming up with that.
Well, I mean, I looked at them, I was like, it's not my army. I'm sorry. They're like, well, you're responsible for it. I'm like, I understand. Like, whatever. And they're like, so for this matchup, you're not going to get your battle ready points. I'm like, fair. And he's like, and if you want to play with them next round, you need to find backpacks for them. And I was like, well, I can't do that. And I'm pretty tired. And even though a couple people were like, well, Nathan, we can probably find you some models to like get you back up to your model total in order to continue playing. I was like, you know what? It's fine. Like, we don't need to iron this out. We don't need to send a bunch of people running around trying to find me backpacks for these models. I'll drop because I'm too tired to keep doing this, really. I was still having a great time. I was given a jersey by Florian at the end of our game, and we hugged it out. And I think somebody snuck a picture of us hugging because it was adorable or something like that. I don't know.
I'm sure it was.
Pretty sure he only gave me a jersey, though, because he felt bad for me because he, like, turbo kicked me into the fucking sun with 1,000 suns. So 1,000 suns, basically.
I have to ask, do you remember which ref it was that said we're just going to pull these models?
It was 2 of them.
Okay.
Mohawk and Lim, I think, actually.
Oh, Jay, okay.
Oh, you got the big dick.
Yeah.
So
I mean, to be fair, a decision
actually,
like that is going to go through them.
Yeah. And like me and Lim actually hadn't met at that point. And I also hadn't met Mohawk. So like we had not met each other really at this point. Even though I was there in the morning for staff stuff and things like that and helped do some setup things and that sort of stuff. Yeah, thank you, Florian. It was Jay and Lim. They came over though. They were very nice about it. They were like, thank you for being so understanding. I was like, you know what? There's like, this is the rule. Like, I understand. I'm not going to fight with you about needing to enforce it. And I'm not upset. I'm so tired. And even though my opponents have been lovely all weekend, I'm just going to drop. I went to go find Dave. He was still playing his game. I found David afterwards. And he was like, what do you mean they need to have backpacks? And so he got to go wander off to the I brought him over to the judges where they got to have a discussion about backpacks and battle readiness, where the judges told David that unless he found backpacks, he couldn't use the models in the team's event.
That started the next day, by the way. We're in
Yes.
Belgium. Dave lives in London.
Look,
I believe at this point, according to 4K Farside, which you should definitely go and listen to because they cover the story far better, Dave starts looking at Eurostar tickets home.
Yes, he does. So I missed that part of it. Because I was like, you are here with the judges. Maybe they can help you. We've got this process started early. And what ends up happening is the Germans save another WTC team, essentially. This time by bringing backpacks to David so that he can put them on his model so that they're battle ready for the team's event. And I come by to see David one day during it, and he's like, oh, Nathan, now you can see my new battle ready Deathwatch veterans with backpacks. And the next time I see David, I'm bringing him probably a Chicago branded backpack so that he can have it. Is what I've decided. I'm just gonna give him a
Yeah,
backpack.
Deathwatch logo Deathwatch logo insignia on it.
I think I will. I will do this just to do it because it'll be fun. The one thing that I learned across WTC is that everybody's amazing and like understanding and awesome, and I had a great time meeting people. It was fucking adorable. I have never been hugged so many fucking times in my entire life. David literally said he didn't think they needed to have them.
This was David's first WTC, right?
Yeah, it was David's first WTC.
David had just apparently never looked at the modeling channel.
He never had played Space Marines, I think, like Deathwatch before, I guess. I don't know. I didn't ask David too many more questions because I was just like, you figure this out.
Yeah, that's fair.
I'm dropping. And then I basically spent the rest of the days like bothering fucking people because that was way more fun and way more amusing to me. So that was
you were very much around my game with Florian when we were
I was
just standing there trying to figure out how either of us could win the game. And it was just a cacophony of errors in our game.
And so I went 2-2. I did come over like several times and was very confused about what the fuck was going on, by the way, at your table. I like looked at it and I was like, what the fuck are you two doing? Like, I have 2 brain cells and I still think this is fucked up, guys.
I mean, at one point in that game, I failed to kill Magnus. I left him on 4 wounds. And so I needed to take an objective that he was on. So I made 2 9-inch charges with 2 20-man neophyte units and wrapped him. And I was like, this is my objective now for the rest of the game. You are not taking this back. And then the next turn, Magnus failed his battle shock test and could not leave. So he was just like, so I'm just here now.
Good. He deserves it. After my Proteus kill team failed their fucking battle shock test by 1. No. Everybody I played was awesome. Rory is correct. I took a bullet in the backpack for David there, apparently. David is nothing but a gentleman, so I didn't really mind. And all I wanted was for David to be able to play his Liston team, so I told him as soon as possible. Yeah. It was a little funny messaging him, though, to get his attention via Discord and being like, hey, can you come? Because I need to talk to you about your models real quick.
Of course, no one's looking at their phone during War Masters.
No. So I grabbed him and we went and we talked and it got resolved. I dropped then. I watched the rest of it, basically. I got to watch most of that Eldar game, which was a very confusing Eldar game for the finals, where I came by at one point while I was setting up the desk for our news desk, essentially. And it looked like they were playing, but they were, in fact, still deploying. And that was like a solid, like,
to deploy.
It was like 45 minutes. Yeah, it was. I'm going to not lie. I think Joe from War Games Live was going to lose his mind because they were still deploying like 45 minutes in.
I can't wait to watch that game back. I've not done any coverage back yet. I'm very much
to say this is why there are clocks for this game.
Yes. And I believe somebody did run out of time during that game, which is not something we're going to probably talk about, but
no.
I had an amazing time and I will play in War Masters next year. I will probably play with an army that is maybe a little simpler to play than Deathwatch is. Maybe Knights or something. I don't know. Something with big robot goes burr is probably a better choice just in case.
I hear Deathwing Knights are pretty easy.
No, just give them Crusher Stampede.
Oh.
We can sort
don't get me that excited, buddy.
I'm sure it's coming back.
I will play big monsters and just go ma the whole time and like yell at people. That's all.
Also, Florian, I wouldn't be surprised if this is actually the case. That so he poses my conclusion from this is that you can just field half-assembled models in UKTC.
Honestly, yeah, a little bit.
So for anyone who is not familiar and who hasn't been following along for the last like 6 months as we've all been getting ready for WTC, they are very strict on models being fully assembled. We had an entire captain's vote last year on whether or not you needed to have the crew hanging off the side of a Venom or a Starweaver. But like, yeah, Marines should have their backpacks. Generally, guns are supposed to be what they actually are. Like WYSIWYG is fairly strictly enforced, even when it's fake. But yeah, it definitely came as a bit of amusement to me that David had not fully assembled his army, and it was just like, what's going on?
Just remember, guys, Jay can tell the difference between 8-pound and exalted 8-pound, and he's going to make that your fault.
Yeah, he can.
Also,
it's in the war gear.
I'm really enjoying all these people telling me that the news desk was great.
So
Just gonna
I
put
was on
that
the
out
news desk a
there.
couple times. The news desk was amazing. I need to go back and watch the segments that like happened between the other rounds because I want to see what you guys did.
Please don't give me more compliments. I can't
I
take
will.
them. Go
You were
away.
wonderful.
No.
Yes,
Stop.
Nathan, you were amazing.
Typhus did this to me, and we'll talk about it later. Why don't we talk about the teams event? And I guess I can start, and I can talk about kind of the general function of how the news desk works.
Why don't you, as the person who had never been before, explain to the people what the WTC is and why it's cool to watch?
Fuck. What is the WTC? The WTC is essentially the Olympics of 40K. If the only thing that it is fucking missing is everybody coming in on a March of Nations thing, like with Scotland playing fucking bagpipes while walking in under their flag
We'll
or
do
some
it.
stuff. Please do. I actually think that would be amazing if all the teams came into like their own little national anthem thing. But basically, WTC is every country picking up their best players through whatever manner their country chooses to come play an 8-man teams event, plus whatever assorted staff, plus whatever assorted non-playing coaches and stuff. Private chefs in the case of some teams, physios in the case of others. Somebody brought a chiropractor, if I remembered correctly. Some teams just bring themselves. And then you essentially start the event with a pool similar to like the World Cup, where at 4 teams are put into each pool. Each pool is seeded with a seed 1, 2, 3, and 4 team. Seeds are essentially based on prior performance. And in order to keep the seeds balanced and so that you don't have two, like England and the United States or England and Poland playing each other in pool play, where they might potentially like knock each other into different performance brackets before even entering into the seeded rounds. You then have, similar to the World Cup, each team plays the other teams that are in their pod, and then they move from the pod phase after round 3 into seeded play, where all the teams are seeded and then play the closest seed to them, essentially. So on round 4, during the first round of seed play, the United States played Germany based on the scoring from their pod, because the United States had scored the most points and Germany had scored the second most points. And then it just kind of goes from there, where you play the other top seeded teams with no teams playing each other twice. So if you follow the coverage on Contact Lost and on the WTC YouTube page, what you can do is you can watch our coverage where we start during pod play, where we have Typhus and Nathan Roberts. Typhus and Nathan provide a bunch of insight and analysis of different decisions, because both of them have both played for WTC teams, coached WTC teams, and helped teams, specifically England and Poland, with their prep for this year's event. So they provide a bunch of insight into how pairings work, how you should do pairings, how factions are changed, how scoring works, and a bunch of other factors that you consider while doing WTC stuff, because there are like multitude of layers past singles that you're considering in order to do teams. You have to consider pairings where you pick what you essentially will have a player from your team play and on what tables they play based on different things. I'm not going to do a whole tutorial right now, but I will say that as a first-time WTC goer who knows basically the bare minimum of all this shit, it was quite interesting. I met Josh Diffie there from BCP, and I talked to him about what I was trying to do, and he said, oh, well, at the end of each day, I'm just going to give you all the stats for that day. I was like, awesome. So about 10 minutes before the start of the day, I realized I probably should have prepared myself a little bit better with a templated stats thing. And instead, I did everything by hand. You'd think, Nathan, definitely you could prepare that for the next day. But no. I got about 3 hours of sleep a night. And was constantly busy doing stuff. So instead of prepping stuff for the next day, I winged it the whole week. So sometimes
he's really got the WG spirit, guys.
He does.
I could prep, or I could stay up another hour drinking. It's not a tough question.
So really, the other part of the WTC is drink. Now, the other part of the WTC is like this whole social side of the WTC, where after the event, during the event, between rounds, everybody kind of gets together and talks about stuff. There's a moment, I think, on the last day where there's like 9 of the top 10 ITC ranked players from like last year all sitting around chatting over beers effectively, which was kind of funny. There were definitely moments where you just saw the concentration of such a large amount of the competitive scene that it was kind of like awe-inspiring for somebody who was first time at WTC. Also, everybody loves each other basically at the WTC for the most part. Like the level of sportsmanship at the WTC is fucking amazing.
I always describe it as the most homoerotic
Team
event on the
Talks was just kind of
calendar.
gushing back and forth about it. It is also that I've never been goosed and kissed by so many men in my entire life. Nassim is one of the people who will greet me by hugging me from behind and like whispering in my ear, "Hello, Nathan." He's the only person who does this. And that is why he's the only person who does it, and I allow it.
The first time he walked up behind me, I almost threw him because I was so surprised because no one else has that like grabby of hands aside from maybe Jeff Brown.
Also, in front of his wife, Tim Penny brought his wife. He just ran up and goosed me before the awards ceremony, like just grabbed my ass and like ran away giggling like a small child. It was fucking hilarious. And I asked his wife if she'd ever seen Tim quite like, I can't remember the word anymore. Quite so handsy basically before with other people. And she was like, no, I've never seen him this way ever in my entire life. So it was pretty funny. Chris, please do not do that. The only reason Nassim gets away with it is because he's the only fucking person who does it. I can't handle that much physical affection. It is going to drive me fucking nuts. The second that you say it,
now you've put that energy in the world. Now,
Yes.
There's a couple more things that are probably worth very quickly covering for WC before we dive into coverage of it. Teams are limited to one of each faction, so that forces diversity. You're only going to see one Eldar list per 8 players. Every team had Eldar, so on and so forth. Also, games are scored on differential, which is basically how big you win is how much you contribute to your team score. Teams are trying to get past 86 battle points, which basically contributes to you're playing every game out of 20, winning a game by 6 points gives you an 11-9, then 11 points gives you 12-8, and so on and so forth, up to a cap of 51. You combine all of your team's individual game scores. Doesn't actually matter what the result was. You could theoretically lose 7 games, win 1 game 20-0, lose all the rest 9-11, and still win the round. So it's all purely based on points scored. Those are probably the 2 most important things to know going into this, is that everybody is playing for every point they can get, because every point contributes to how well your team is doing, win or lose, which is very different from a singles environment where you're just always playing to win because there is no alternative incentive, and that everybody is playing a different army on the team. So you're never going to see 2 other players in the same round. You're never going to, and that's basically just there's a little bit more in that with pairings where teams you can try to do things like protect certain lists. So for example, I played a Dark Angels list this event that was very strong into the field in general, but had functionally no answer to Eldar. But that's okay because I'm playing teams and I'm doing the pairing. So I just say, hey, Innes, I don't want Eldar. And then Innes goes, that's fine. You're me. Let's just avoid the Eldar. And it's great. So yeah, as a whole, those are probably the most important things for the WC. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that. The event is massively complicated. And you should definitely go and check out the coverage on Contact Lost, French War Games, the WC itself on YouTube, War Games Live, and Target Priority, I believe was the German stream, who all covered the event in great detail. There's loads of it out there. Every team's Facebook social media page will have dozens of posts about it and so on and so forth. I know teams like the Australians went through and did like live rounds and things like that. So there's loads of coverage out there from it. And as we get out of the woodwork, the event finished 2 days ago. There's going to be so much coverage of this event across the world that you will not believe. 4K Fireside's already published theirs. I'm sure we'll see some stuff coming out of the Our War Boys like Jack and John. All the various like other language media projects will do the same. So do keep an eye out for that. If there's a country you're interested in, there will be something coming out of it.
Also, really the best summary of the WTC is that it is in fact not a gaming event at all, but in fact a place where you trade jerseys with other people.
Yeah, it's like Pokemon cards but for Warhammer.
I'm gonna find the correct end of this jersey eventually. So here's the Scotland jersey that I got from Chris Irvine. I'm wearing
and it's
the French
definitely
jersey.
Embodied the Pokemon theme when he just tossed a Pokeball at Ben Jurek and captured him for his team.
Yep. That is something that deserves being touched on. I
want to talk about our event. Yeah.
So I'll talk about the news desk kind of format real quick. You can find it if you want to watch it on Contact Lost and on the WTC YouTube page. essentially what we were going to do was pre-round and post-round every day. We were going to go through some stats, and then we were going to have coach and player interviews, which Jeremy got dragged over for, and Ennis also got dragged over for at one point. And Ennis gave like one of the most analytical review like interviews that we had over the course of the whole weekend, where he talked through one of his pairings, I believe. Yeah, so that was the general format. We just kind of brought over people to interview them. Nathan Roberts and Typhus and us went through all the pairings for the like top highlight kind of things or whatever interested team matchups we were thinking about. So we went through all the pairings, and then we would at the last round, essentially for the seeded round, we essentially did like field reporting from Nathan and Typhus, where we aggressively did like minute by minute updates to points and stuff like that, which probably was very dramatic sounding, but also was very amusing to talk about, because you also got to realize that coaches are terrible at projections. Projections would go up, projections would go down, projections would go up, projections would go down every like 2 to 3 minutes, basically.
As it should be.
And then we'd have a result, and that was kind of it. But it was a lot of fun. We brought on a ton of people. Had a ton of great interviews. You can watch me say at least one country wrong to the player from it, which is always amusing. Especially watching me then proceed to apologize profusely, because I still had only 2 to 3 brain cells left to rub together for the whole coverage of the whole event. So, yeah.
I'm honestly impressed you had that many, man. You did so much work that week.
I recorded way too much content. I did every single interview except for like 2. It was probably more than I should have done, but I did all.
Did you have a good time?
I did. It was amazing. I think coaches started to get really annoyed by me at a certain point, because I'd be coming over and be like, hey, how you doing? Although it's easier with some teams because they had like 3 or 4 coaching staff. So like for Canada, I could bother like 3 different people in order to get information from it. So I could spread out my annoyance across 3 or 4 people with some teams. And some teams are much more serious and like hardwired focused in on what they're doing. Team USA had like a bunch of very, very friendly coaches. And so I ended up talking to Naj most of the week, basically. Because Steven Corrales, like their head coach, essentially was running around and was hyper focused on the job that he was doing, which was good. And Steven Corrales was an incredibly nice person to talk to outside of like things, but he was running around with a clipboard and was like a man at work. Yeah, I don't know what else to talk about for this. It was amazing. You should go to it. That's it. It was great fun. Good.
Glad to hear it. All right, Jeremy, do you want to kick us off? How was your pod phase? Let's do pod phase, and then we'll finish it, and then the back 4.
Sure. So our pod phase, round 1, we played into Croatia. I believe it was Croatia's first year back at the WTC. They had previously played in the ETC, but they weren't present last year. This year, I believe they had 2 Polish mercs on their team, Juju and Arek. It was a fun round. We oopsied Tim into Eldari, and that was, our Eldari into Arek's GSC and lost that game. But aside from that, I think we scored like 112 points to their 48. Many of our games like just swung to 20-0s after like round 2, and I just sat down and enjoyed a beer with I think it was their guard player that Francois just dummied. So that was that. And then round 2, we played into Norway, who we played that on Wargames live stream because Patrick Woods had made a bet with Joe from Wargames Live that if they lost on stream, he would get the Wargames Live tattoo, which was a very, very bold bet to make. But Norway was definitely, in our minds, the most well-prepared team in our pod. We paired fairly well. We had a couple upsets in our games. We ended up drawing the round 81-79 in our favor. So as the round ended, I joked to Joe that he still had Patrick still had to get the tattoo because we technically beat them. He's like, no, it's a draw. There's no tattoo. I was like, oh, okay, fair.
Time out.
Yeah.
1 second. So Nathan and Typhus bet a shoey based on the Poland-English match, and if they drew, they said they would both do it together, like cross arms and do the shoey.
Yeah,
This sounds like some half-assed betting to me.
I know.
I don't think Joe put anything up as stakes for that.
Well, in this case, it was having us on stream.
It's not stakes, bro. It's not stakes, guys.
I mean, the
I'm
Norwegians
sorry.
were probably one of our most fun matches along with the Dutch. But yeah, so we drew that round. It was a bit of a heartbreaker for us because we had paired what felt like a very solid win. Even talking to a couple other people, it felt like we were going to handily win that round. And then 2 games went sideways, one of which was our CSM into their Chaos Knights, where we had paired it at around a 15 and we ended up getting a 5, which that stung. And then round 3, we played into Ireland. We played them round 5 last year. The Irish are a super friendly bunch. Everyone seemed to enjoy their games. We had a lot of fun watching Ridvan dismantle their captain, Joseph, playing his Eldari with his Necrons, where he wound up with Lich Guard on the on Joseph's home objective turn 4 because he just couldn't kill them. But yeah, that was we won that round. I think it was 90-70. Yeah, that was our pod phase. We came out of it with 2 wins and a draw. Our goal had been 3 wins, but getting out of the pod phase undefeated was already a step up from where we were last year, where we had finished with 2 wins and a loss to Sweden. Yeah, that's us. Ennis, what about you guys in the pod phase?
Yeah, so we had a reasonably tough pod phase in that we had pulled a team that we prepped with and France as a pool 2C coming into it. Obviously, you can't ever expect to have the bunny run that some teams get in the pod phase. But pairing the team that we'd literally prepared with is a really tough goal. We ended up feeling a little bit better into that round than Iceland did, just a little bit better like across the board. And we ended up taking that round out fairly comfortably, like 102-58 or something like that. Definitely not an absolute blowout. Like there was definitely a lot of margin in there for that to have gone badly for us. But just on the day, it didn't quite pan out that way for them. I managed to pair into Yoko's GSC, and he was not expecting that to be a bad matchup for him. I don't think the Dark Angels just definitely have the right answers there for that, and it was very, very appreciated in that moment to get the big win. Then round 2, we paired into UNA, which actually ended up being our closest round of the pod and one of our closest rounds. I think we won that one like 88-72. A really, really tight game where I think a couple of games that we'd expected to be really good for us just ended up slipping slightly out of hand, which was just, it absolutely can happen in that sort of environment. But it was, yeah, it's not what you're looking for when you come over and you're like a game that you're expecting to be a big win suddenly turns into a loss. And you're like, oh no, this isn't great. We're gonna work with this. But we got a few nice things in there, like a 20-0 from our Thousands on the Knights that just kept us above the line. I had a really good game into Malta from the Hot Stakes guys who was playing for that team with the CSM, where he just I believe that's actually my funniest moment from the event for me was I dropped a point of differential because I rolled too well on saves. He shot at me with like a Force Fiend into my Deathwing Knights on an objective in cover with Armory Contempt. Did no damage. Like I just rolled 8 dice, rolled all 3 ups, and he swapped to, oh, I guess I'll just do actions with my 8 obliterators. So I'm like, oh, you were meant to shoot me. So he ended up swinging up like seven battle points off of that and costing me a differential point on the round. It was very disheartening. But no, very well played by all of those guys. It was a really, really great round. And then we finished that off with France, which we played on the French stream because all of the French guys were on the French stream, obviously. All the French games were on the French stream. Another really, really fun round. I ended up making a big mistake on stream against their Thousand Sons player and felt like I cost myself the game. Definitely there was still a lot to play there, but I felt like I was in a very good position and I fumbled the bag. So definitely boxed me back into gear for the rest of the day or for the rest of that game. Like I feel like I played my turn 3 for 5 very well and managed to recover a 5 from a game I should have got 20-0 on stream. But across the board, the French just got the better of us. They were slightly better players in a lot of the matchups, not all of them. Obviously, my guys are great, but the French were very well prepared. The French came knowing our list. The French absolutely deserved that round win, and they got something like a 90-something to a 60-something into us. I apologize, I don't have the score memorized or in front of me, but it felt like we were a couple of games going slightly more our way, a couple of swing downs not happening, from that being like a very good set of pairings, just turning into a loss that slips slightly away from us. It's one of those ones where I looked at my score and I'm like, yeah, if I flip that into a 10, if I'd flip that into like a 15 or a 20, we maybe scrape the draw. But that's, there's always variance there. But it was never going to get us the win, so it doesn't hurt quite as bad. There was definitely more work we needed to do there, more that we're looking for next year, and even that we did over the night into the next several rounds. So yeah, we ended the pause phase on 2 wins and a loss. I believe we were the lowest placing team on 2 wins and a loss because obviously we had a really, really tough pod. relative to like our level. Obviously having a pool 1 seed in there means that you're probably likely to have a lower score. And then Iceland and UN Slovakia both ended up being very, very strong. I believe UN Slovakia actually ended up finishing fairly well across the event as a whole. So, but yeah, it was really, really interesting pod phase for us. So we definitely went into it expecting to go 2-1, and we were very happy to come out of it. But France had definitely looked mortal, so we're a little gutted to have missed the draw there.
France had also had like a lot of close matchups.
Yeah, France. It was we saw them draw get like an 88 into. They pulled an 88 into Iceland, and we had just beaten Iceland, so we were very confident going into it, and it just didn't pan out for us on the day, unfortunately. Oh, yeah, the hero of that round was Ben MacJurek, who I'll explain the story of in just a second. 10-10ing Eldar on stream with guard. Oh, my hero. So for us, the event started on a little bit of a sour note. Our guard player, Ryan Carr, unfortunately fell ill with chickenpox and some form of kidney failure on the Tuesday before the event, and was instructed not to travel. So we had to pull a last-minute replacement. We ended up asking the Americans if we could borrow one of their 407 coaches. And they very kindly lent us Ben Jurek for the weekend. Ben is a wonderful player who's been doing very well in the United States, and they basically were like, we would like to get this guy a bit of development, go and take him and run him through the ringer. So we put him on to guard with no practice. He played one practice game on the Thursday before the event started, 20-0 our Thousand Sons player, and then rolled straight into the event. He was writing his data sheets on his hand as we went. It was wonderful. He was doing so much prep. It was truly magical. He went and hired a kilt from a costume store and everything. Truly, Ben was an absolute hero for the weekend. And if I mention him throughout the event, throughout the rest of this report, please do know that Ben absolutely saved our backsides and is an honorary Scotsman for the rest of his life, as far as I'm concerned.
He actually told me
he may be considering a tattoo.
He's getting a lordship, is what I was told.
Getting a lairdship. Thank you very much.
Yeah, lairdship. Sorry. He's getting a lairdship, is what I was told. So he's going to be a true Scotsman soon enough.
Sometimes you just get recruited. I've never seen Gaunt's Ghosts and Sentinels played so aggressively. He was his round 1. I believe he killed the last 2 Lich Guard in combat with Gaunt's Ghosts on turn 1. They just failed the first battle shock to a Medusa and just got walloped, and then just got charged and shanked by Gaunt's Ghosts. They were scoring a decent number of cat turning outposts, all that sort of thing.
Which round was it that he had the carriage in someone's backfield killing an Autarch? Was that the stream game?
That was Zika, I believe. Yeah, I think Skark did the same thing, but for deploy teleport homers.
It did feel a little bit more like he was making a statement when Skark did it than anything else, but that's okay.
That is Skark for you.
We won't talk about how Skark definitely did that just to T-pose on his opponent.
Technomancer and a Lich Guard in combat. Yeah, with Gaunt's Ghosts. What a hero.
The little knife.
So, how did the rest of the event go for you, Jeremy? So, the back 4 games.
The back 4 games for us were we played. So we came out of the pod phase 2 wins and a draw, and we paired right into, I believe it was Denmark that morning on Saturday morning. We paired what felt like a reasonably strong win. And this is going to be a trend for the rest of the event for Canada, because there were 2 matches that went sideways and we ended up in a draw. I think it was 82-78 in their favor, but it was one of those moments where, as the round would go on, and Nathan was referred to this earlier, but as the round would go on, I'd be like, oh, that slipped by a point, that's slipping by a point. I'd be looking at a table state, looking at a score sheet, and be like, this was gonna be a 10, it's gonna be a 5. Okay, I need to go find 5 points somewhere else to bring this back into a win. And every now and then I would get Typhus looking at me, and I just get annoyed and look at him back like, no, don't, just not right now. I don't want an update. It's a draw. It's gonna be a draw again. I'm getting tired of this. So that was Denmark. We had a lovely round against them. They were super friendly. They had just come off of a heartbreaking loss into the Americans, where on the last round of the pod phase, at one point I saw one of the American coaches running around looking very, very flustered, because apparently 3 matchups had flipped on their head twice, once against the Americans and then once in favor of the Americans. They went from looking like they were going to draw Denmark to crushing them. So the Danes were definitely hungry for a win. They couldn't get it against us, but we did manage to draw. I will
say that every time that we looked at your pairings, there's a theme for a couple teams that we saw kind of do this. Is some teams just didn't close out on what we thought were advantaged pairings towards them in multiple rounds. which is what we saw with the Canadian team multiple times from the desk when Nathan and Typhus, me and Tomek or Joker kind of analyzed pairings for you guys.
Trust me, I know.
Putting it out in the universe for you to, make your sadness complete.
Yep. So then after that, we paired into the Netherlands.
Yep.
Who we had lost to by a point in a heartbreaker last year. We had thought we had outpaired them last year, and then one of our greens was a green for them, which was not good, and we lost by 1 point. And then this time around, we paired. I think we actually paired reasonably well into a light win, and we had one match went sideways, and we ended up in a draw. And it was, I think it was an 82-78 on our side, or an 81-79. It was like right down the middle. And again, it was one game that had gone slightly sideways, so we couldn't recoup it from the other matches in enough time.
82-78 to them. Was the round.
Yeah.
Is that the one where you had an 18-2 flip on one of your games? From like projections? I'm just curious. I can't remember which one that was.
You know what? I had not been looking at my projections because they kind of hurt me a little bit, but I will actually pull up the projections for this one because it was interesting. So if I head over to our Netherlands pairing matrix, we had paired, as soon as my sheet finishes loading, we had actually paired a draw into them. But one of the ones that did, the ones that kind of slipped on us, we had 3 of our matches just go slightly south from where we had paired them. And that was Francois into GSC, Kier into their Death Watch, who was on our Orcs. Francois was our Death Watch player. And then Devin, who was playing our Thousand Suns, into their Custodes. All of them missed their prediction by basically, I think it was 4 points. Some heroes within the team were our GSC player Riley going into Dick Vanderkurst's Necrons and just mollywopped him. I think it was 15-5. They gave us the Eldar mirror with us having table pick, where it was Tim Dietlif's Eldari into Rude's Eldari. Rude's list was double Wraithguard brick with a Wraith Knight. Tim just had the single Wraith Knight, and he actually recognized that he could get eyes with the right table pick. He could get eyes on 2 of the 3 every single turn. And since you can only phantasm 1 unit, it meant that something was going to die every turn. Whereas he only ever had to keep the Wraith Knight safe because he also had 3 D cannons that did a fair amount of damage. And so that ended up being Tim went first, which helped him. But he was pretty confident, even going second, that he was going to get good points. But him going first meant that it was a 20 for him. And then our T-Suns paired into Florian's Thousand Suns, but he hadn't really projected a very good score because he had been struggling into T-Suns. And I think he got a 3 in that matchup. But yeah, like we ended up getting more points than we paired for, but not in the matches we were expecting. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
I'll actually pull up round 4 because that one was also interesting. Just so people can get an idea of what this looks like. Unpin that. Round four, Denmark. Yeah, because Denmark, we actually paired what we thought was going to be like a mid-80s. And we ended up with a 77 to their 83. And the big swings on that one were we had our CSM into their CSM in a draw, where it was play this safely, play it carefully, just, don't make any big risks. And our CSM player deployed on the line in table quarters deployment and went second.
Oof.
And I came back to that table after battle round 1, and all of the Terminators were gone because he had lost them to a turn 1 charge.
I think that was the moment actually where I saw you the most stressed, and so I talked to Dickie instead of you.
Yeah, I was very stressed because we had like several other games go exceptionally well that round. Like our Eldari 19-1 their Imperial Knights, our Necrons 14-6 their Eldari, our Genestealer cults beat their Custodes very handily despite the Custodes player really knowing the matchup. Riley was phenomenal all week long in terms of like just generally outplaying most of his opponents.
He was going and rested. It was the going and rested.
I'm sure it was going and rested.
What's that like?
I know,
WTC?
seriously. He was always high energy every morning. Like he was very like anyone who met him, he was very like a measured individual, but he was always just raring to go.
He definitely
I would
needs
drop him
his-
into a matchup and I'd be like, I need a 20 here. And he would look at me and go, bet.
He definitely needs his hoodie next year, though.
Yeah, we've agreed now with his performance that next year he's not going to have like a jersey. He's going to have a Team Canada hoodie because he was so much more comfortable when he was in a hoodie than when he was in a jersey. So yeah, that was our round 4. And then I'll quickly talk about our round 6 and round 7. So at this point, we're on 2 wins and 3 draws. And I would lie if I say we, as a team, we're not starting to get a little frustrated with not being able to close out a round. So we met into Germany in round 6. Germany, who had just come out of the seeding phase, losing both of their games, the first one to the Americans and then the second one to the Swedes. So they were definitely hungry for a win. And their pairing showed that. The way in which they were very careful about how they dropped their cards, the way in which they were very careful about who ended up in those rough matchups, because they were also playing with a sub because their Chaos Knights player had taken ill. He had, if I remember correctly, the translation, he had a gallbladder. He had to have emergency gallbladder removal surgery. And so Dominic, their captain, was playing their Chaos Knights, and he didn't know the army that well. He was still a very good player for his own rights, but he didn't have an amazing time. And so so we paired fairly well, but we definitely had our weaknesses were really starting to come through there. And we paired a loss, and I communicated that to the people that I needed points out of very quickly. I was like, Tim, you need to push this. Ridvin, you need to pull a miracle out of your butt. And Chris, you just need to just crush the Knights, the Chaos Knights. And those 3 did deliver. Ridvin was on stream against their Death Watch player, Manuel, and I watched their Death Watch player go increasingly frustrated as Ridvin pulled more and more 4-up invuln and 5-up Feel No Pains out of his ass.
Is that where he made like
game,
a 12-inch and an 11-inch charge or something like that?
So the game opened with him CP re-rolling an 11-inch charge with his Satan into a veteran squad.
Sure.
Yeah, but I was just like, the first question I had was, Ridvin, why did you CP reroll that? And it's like, I didn't need the CP that turn. Because the next turn, the only thing I was going to need was 1 CP for reanimation, and then to do it for free with the Overlord. Because if I remember correctly, their Death Watch list didn't have a Watchmaster, so there was no Vec to worry about. So Ridvin was like, it's a high-risk play, but if it works, he now has to deal with a Catan in his deployment zone. And that was the story of the game from then on out. It was making 10, 11, 12-inch charges with things that he just shouldn't have done. And so at one point, we had Francois going into their Eldari, and it was not going well. So Francois decided to gambit. So I went and grabbed 2 dice from Scary. The Death Watch player knew what I was doing, handed the dice to Francois, and their coach said, no, he can't. He's not allowed to use those dice. This is just going to go badly. It turns out Francois got table turn 5, so he couldn't gambit anyways. But I did want to see what that would have rolled out to be. But yeah, that was our worst round. We lost to Germany. I think it was 94-66 or 93-67. It was pretty rough. Definitely the team was on a bit of a downer at that point because we were now 2 wins, 3 draws, and a loss. But at the same time, we were at 3.5 wins. The team's best performance previously was 4 wins. So as long as we drew or won our last round, the team would be pretty comfortable. And the fact that up to this point, we'd only lost to Germany did make us feel pretty good. Because at this point last year, after round 6, we were on 2 losses, 1 to the Netherlands and 1 to the Swedes. So that takes us into round 7, where we paired into the Italians. For those familiar with WTC history, Canada paired into Italy last year, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle between a couple players. Neither of those players were in attendance this year, and the teams largely just got along quite well. We had a good round. There was definitely a lot of flips in this round. We paired fairly low, which led to me basically going to 3 different players and saying, you need to push, you need to push, you need to push. Just take big risks and get us the points where you can. The best one was Chris, our captain, getting the Imperial Knights monkey off of his back, so to speak. He had been struggling into them earlier at War Masters, and I just said, "You play him. We have table pick. You take table 2, and he will not be able to shoot you." And that's exactly what happened. We grabbed him that table as our first defender, and the Imperial Knight player spent probably a good 20 minutes after that round was over cursing out his teammates for letting him play on that table, because they had first table pick and they put their Chaos Knights on a much better table, and the Imperial Knight player basically never shot Chris. And
Did you play on a Super L?
It was the Super L's.
Goddamn Super L's.
Yeah, when the Knight player walked up to the table, was like, I can't win this. There's no way. So Chris got a 14 there. Our Tim 20'd their Custodes. Riley bounced a little bit into their Chaos Knights. But what was probably the most interesting one there was our Thousand Sons Devon into their Necrons. Because I was chatting along and kind of joking around with the Italian head coach for a while. And at one point he came by and was like, "Yes, you have a 20 in the T Sons and Necron game." And or as he put it, he drew a little grave symbol with a dead stick figure next to it and said, "This is our Necrons right now." Because he was not expecting any points out of the game. And by some miracle, their Necron player won that 11-9. So I had been like tracking that game, and it was going to be like a 17 or an 18 in my books by what happened. I still don't fully understand what happened in that game, because I walked away for 15 minutes and came back to Devin going, "I'm losing. I don't know how I'm going to keep this back." And so we went from being in a comfortable winning position to a draw again. And yeah, it was just finishing a draw. It felt good because we only had the one loss, but it also hurt because it meant that we finished in 14th overall, because we only had eight game points,
and there was like 407 teams on 9.
Yep. So that definitely stung. The results, I will admit, I am not happy overall with where the team placed. I am very happy with the work that the majority of the team put in. Many players had demonstrated that they had done a lot of work leading up to it. It showed in their matchups, Tim and Riley especially. I could walk up to them and say, "I need this," and they would get me that within a point. Riley's only miss was against the German Necron player, where he bounced horribly into a 4-up invuln warrior brick, which just refused to die on an objective. So we finished with 2 wins, a loss, and 4 draws, 14th overall. Not the best outcome for the team, but I think it was our second best performance after last year. So, depending on how many teams there'll be, we'll probably be somewhere between a seed 1 and a seed 2, most likely a seed 2 team next year. So we effectively will disband the team next week and then get going to the next year. Ennis, how was the rest of your run?
Yeah, so round 4 we paired into Ireland, who you guys had just played in the pod phase. They were the top 1-0-1 1-on-1 team. We were the bottom 2-1 team, so we paired into them. The round paired fairly reasonably. You kind of, when you pair these things, you kind of have an expectation that you're going to be somewhere between usually like 65 and 105 points on your prediction, with like normalizing around like that 85 mark, which is what you're aiming for on your pairing. So you're obviously trying to pair well. Then the other teams will have something that tells you something completely different, and then the truth is always somewhere in the middle. So we paired this round for somewhere predicting roughly around, again, centralized around that like 90 points, I think like 87 was our prediction here. We ended up having one game go very badly against us, which was the Chaos Knights game. We played our town to Chaos Knights. We ended up getting 2 from that. We were predicting a draw-ish game, and then we had a few games that swung up. The problem we had with this round was the first 4 results that came in were a 20 for both for us, a 20 for them, and then a 19 for us. So we had 59 points banked in the first 4 games out of the 75 you need to draw the round, and the 86 you need to win the round. And then we waited 2.5 hours for the next result to come in, which is torturous, because every single game that's left is like we had like a GSC mirror where our guy's going second and gets pinned in. We have Necrons into Demons, which is just grinding. We have Custodians into Necrons, which is doing exactly the same thing. And then we have this Town to Chaos Knights game where we're getting told we're getting 0 for the entire time. And we're like, if these games are like grindy all end up on 7s, then we're gonna lose. We're gonna draw the round. And like slowly they come in and like, I got the 10, I got the 12, I got the 2 when I was 0, and we slid over the line with a 93. But it's one of those torturous ones where like you're just like everybody, you just have to hold your points. Like everything you can get me, every 2 points you can get me above your prediction, like gives me 2 points of bandwidth somewhere else. And thankfully, everybody was able to hold, and we ended up having 8 points to play with, or 7 points to play with, which feels very different from how the round was looking. But pairings went really well there. We had 3 games swing up, 1 game swing pretty badly down, but overall, like we got our guard into their Custodes, which was a 20. We got Dark Ages into Imperial Knights. We got Eldar into anything, so fairly comfortable there. Around 5, we got the pair down into Australia. As you do.
That definitely wasn't a moment where I was looking and I was like, oh, the pair down into Australia, hey.
Yeah, I know. Getting that good old Australian reward. So Australia had just come off a rough loss into France and definitely came in swinging. Prediction here was somewhere in the 75 range, so you're looking at the lower end of a draw, which definitely means you have a lot less to play with. Australia just had a very good matrix into us. They had very good players. We had a couple of predictions go very badly against us here. Our Necrons predicted a big win into their Imperial Knights and just did not get it. The Imperial Knight player got told to push, went for a Hail Mary, and it worked. And that swung from a prediction of like a 13 to a 4, which was enough to cost us the round by itself. And then we had our Custodians and Necrons. We just didn't understand what Liam's list was going to do to Custodians. One thing that I don't think is spoken about enough is the difference between the first game of the day and the second game of the day. The first game of the day, you get like a night to prep for. The second game of the day, you get like 30 minutes if you're eating food. So we did not have time to do what we were doing for every other round, which is looking at what they played against, looking at what tables they picked. We got rolled up and we're like, cool, we're playing Hackett's Necrons. I guess we pair it like it's Necrons and hope for the best. And that unfortunately didn't work. And this list was built to prey on Custodes, which we happily fed it. That was definitely the inflection point that cost the round. They were better prepared than us. We had a much more standard team comp than they did, which favors the team that has the weirder team comp. And they played better on the day. Other than that, we had one game that swung up pretty nicely. Our guard into GSC, we actually ended up pulling 9 points out of, which we weren't expecting. Apparently, that's just an okay matchup now, but we definitely weren't expecting it when we gave it the pairing. And then everything else, it's that standard thing where most people just hit the low end of their prediction because you're playing against a team that's as good or better than you. And that's not enough to overcome. So we ended up with 65 points here, 10 points off that draw. But if we have that, I think if we get that game with Necrons into IK that we were hoping, if their push didn't work, then that's potentially in spitting range of a round draw, which honestly, I'm happy with that into Australia. We made them work hard enough that they had to put telling it to push and take a big risk. It worked, and they got the round payoff, and that's what WTC is about. Round 6, then we paired into New Zealand. This was actually a really weird round as well. Like we ended up having a lot more points to play with on the board here. We finished this one with a 91 to 69. But looking at our prediction here, we predicted somewhere in the mid 80s, and we had 2 games go hard against us. It was just that every game that didn't go hard against us, we hit the top end of prediction. So we kind of had the other thing that we had with the Australia game, where our Italian to Death Watch, we predicted 5 to 7 points. Dave Gaylor went for the push. It worked. We got 3. Our Custodians into Tyranids, they went for the push. He failed a couple of crucial battle shots on the Shadow on the Warp Turn. That game swung down to a 10, where it probably could have been a 12, 11, or 12 if things go more normally. And then across the rest of the board, we predicted 15 to 20. We predicted 15 to 20. We hit the 20 on 2 or 3 games. We got the middle or top end of the matrix everywhere else, and being slightly better players and slightly better pairings and getting the right pushes from myself and Brian meant that we were able to overcome a small swing down and a reasonably large swing down to keep the win on the round. But definitely New Zealand made us sweat. There was a world in which that could have gone wrong. Never quite badly enough that it ends up in that lost territory, which is always the comforting moment. Like you want a swing down to take you into a draw, not to take you into a loss. Into when it takes you into a loss, that you start being like, what are we doing wrong here? Obviously, going from draw to a loss is fine, but if you're expecting to win a round, you like to at least not lose it. Drawing it still takes you something, which was great. So New Zealand was a super great round. They ended up finishing 15th and best newcomer, which is awesome. I look forward to seeing them in C2 next year. They definitely deserved it based on this year's performance. They were all a pleasure to play against. And I finally got to play Alex Tavis in a real tournament instead of us playing in a garage or on TTS where he's playing like the perfect character to me. And I finally got to just shove Deathwing Knights through him. It was great. In the last round, we ended up playing against Denmark, who Jeremy had just played a couple of rounds previous. And this round ended with us feeling like we had paired fairly well. Like our prediction was an 88, which is a comfortable win. Like you have points to play with. We had a couple of games swing up. We ended up getting more points out of their elder than we expected with our Tau. Brian ended up pushing very hard to get 20 off their CSM. I hit the top end of Matrix against Thousand Suns, and we hit the top end of Matrix with the GSC into Necrons. Unfortunately, the rest of the games just kind of didn't go great for us. Their Deathwatch player deployed on the line against Guard and went, I'm going to just try and go first. And that swung from a predicted like 18 to 20 down to a 10 because the guy went first and had a good result from it. We ended up getting a 3 off of our Necron City Custodes, off of just misunderstanding the win condition. Just a couple of things went wrong. And our Knights, into our Thousand Sons into Knights, a Castellan clipped the edge of Magnus's wing on turn 1 and put like 9 damage on him that we just couldn't sustain. Simon's counterattack back failed to pick up a single Armiger, and the game swung down to 2 points when we predicted 12 to 15. So we had a couple of good push-ups, hitting the top end of Matrix in in all the games we won. We hit the top end of Matrix or broke above Matrix, but the losses were just too much, and we ended up losing this with the scrapiest of scrapes into a draw. Dragged ourselves over the line with 76. Which was utterly terrifying. I definitely feel like this was one we could have won. It's the one I'm the most I'm okay with losing to Australia and France. They were both better teams than us. They were both better prepared. But Denmark, I really felt like we could have taken. I was very disappointed with the. I don't know. I think the pairings process could have been a little cleaner here. There was a lot of. We paired for a lot of comfortable fours that maybe weren't comfortable fours. Just a little bit of lack of preparation. One of those, especially the round 7, we only got an hour over lunch to prepare, which definitely did not help. It was very much I'm still in the queue waiting for food when I should be doing Matrix preparation at this point, which I think is definitely a bit of feedback I'll pass on for next year, is that if you're going to have an hour and a half for lunch for every other round, don't make it an hour for the last round.
Yeah.
It definitely hurt. I would have liked to be able to sit and actually run through a couple of simulations of the Matrix and pairings and things like that, because obviously the Danes would have had the same there, but I definitely felt unprepared going into this one, and I would have liked a little more time with it.
Our team felt the same way going into round 7 against Italy, especially since round 6 into Germany had been such a nail biter and such a tough round for everyone. Many of our games went to time or very close to time, which meant that we were just finished. We had just enough time to decompress, and our guys were in line getting food when the pairings went up. I knew we were going to play Italy, but still, it was just always you never know when something's going to get shuffled a little bit or a card
you don't
comes
even know
in.
what tables you're playing on yet, so you can't go to them. And there's
exactly.
a lot of.
So
I definitely would offer that feedback for the round 7 game, is that we needed the same time for lunch as we got every other round. I wouldn't have minded coming in at 7:30 to get the extra half hour.
Yep, I think our team would have been fine with that, to get the extra half hour to prep between rounds. Because we were going through and updating. Because one of the biggest challenges this year was the mission to mission impact on pairings. And we could probably do an entire episode on this, but as opposed to 9th edition, 10th edition missions can skew greatly from one round to another in terms of how they affect the more like minutiae pairings. Obviously, Eldari is Eldari, but like when you're looking at pairing GSC,
I did think they did
a
decent job of having those missions be earlier in the rounds. I think having the weirder missions in the pod stages helped for this.
Yes, it did help.
The Ritual and Perks the 4 were both in pod stage. This was, I think we played like priority targets and take and hold on day 4. Which definitely helped with that. Like you could kind of take the mental. I think what we probably needed to do was just spend a bit more time on that, like the Saturday evening, prepping for all the teams we could play, and just like making sure we had a matrix filled out for the round that we could play them, because we knew roughly who could be on the same points as us. But that's like still 10 teams. I'm not doing that much prep. I'm not staying up till 3 a.m. reading lists for teams that I haven't had a chance to play against.
Agreed.
But yeah, I definitely that's the one bit of real feedback. The other one is the food queue on the Sunday was kind of nuts, because I think they sold out of a lot of the easy food stuff pretty early, like the sandwiches and the sausage rolls that they had, which meant that you kind of had to go and do the hot food queues, which were a lot longer and took ages. I definitely would have dashed in, grabbed sausage rolls, and gone and sat and done pairings for 40 minutes instead of waiting in the food queue for admittedly very nice chicken satay. It just wasn't quite what I was looking for at that point.
Yeah, and also
could we have prepped for that and had a coach go and order everybody's? Yeah, probably. But that's also putting a lot of burden on coaches who we kind of still wanted for the round that we were playing. So,
well, and also the fry / burger place, truck that was outside didn't open until like right when lunch started. So even if you had gone early, like a couple of us did actually go a little early during Germany. We're like, nope, we can't get food for the team. All right, guess we're going back to Plan B, which is everyone gets their stuff afterwards. Anyways,
Yeah, and then there's always the one other downside. You're sitting in the food queue with your team. The team you're playing might be two like groups behind you here in your prep. Like there's not, you can't, like, you don't know that when you're going into the queue, right? So definitely
Yeah.
definitely a little awkward. I think that could have been handled a little bit better. But overall, really great event for us. We finished with the most points we've ever had, or tied for the most points we've ever had. We scored 9 points the year we came third, but it was in a smaller tournament with only 6 rounds. So obviously, getting the same points in one more round is a little easier. So there's definitely still a lot of room to push for us, but I was very happy with the team. Ben coming in last minute to step in and replace our guard player. Obviously, like hurt, like Ben was much less prepared than our guard player would have been, but he stepped into the role admirably and did his job with absolute aplomb. And if he's not on Team America next year, I promise that I'll fight Sean Naden. I won't promise I'll win, but I'll give it a go. Ben McJurek deserves to be there.
Yeah, 100%. I want to shout out my coaching staff. I had Dickie Hughes from Grim After Dark. I had John Winter Russell, a friend of ours locally, Jeff Brown, and then Edouard me. All did a fantastic job of keeping me sane and keeping me informed of how games are going, so I could instead just process the matches in my head and figure out where we needed to push, where we were going to slip. All of them did a wonderful job of keeping players informed and hydrated, so we weren't constantly running around with that. But yeah, that was, I think Innes has kind of expressed the only kind of criticisms that I would have in terms of what could be done better. The event overall was fantastic.
And I'll do the same. I'll give a massive shout out to Nick Malone, who was our primary coach this year, who handled the game side of things for me. It was wonderful to have a coach that I could just like focus on my game a little bit more and have him handle most of the like, do we need to push? Do we need to not push? I definitely jumped in like once I'd finished my game, because anybody who's seen me play knows that I was usually done around the 2 hour mark. And it definitely helped a ton with being able to like make sure that the right things were going on. I don't know. It feels like after 5 years, I kind of have a bit more of a sense of when the round is going well or not. Like the New Zealand round, he was like, I think we're drawing this round. I'm like, we've got it. It's fine. It definitely happens a little bit like that. Like you kind of get a vibe for it, looking over the games, and you're like, if we get a 6 there, a 5 there, a 4 there, and like you look at the scoreboards, you can kind of tell where it's going. But Nick's not quite there yet, but give him some time. And we also had Tom Crayford, who stepped in. Tom was over just to do the singles, but ended up volunteering to hang out with us. We ended up having a spare player pass because obviously Ryan wasn't able to make it. So we just gave that to him, and he was a massive help for us doing water runs at the start of every round. Just everybody having a glass of water at their table to make sure that they're not everybody's just drinking beer all the time and stuff like that was great to have. So massive thank you to Tom, and we'll definitely be having him back. So. And then obviously, massive shout out to my entire team. You guys were all legends. You guys took everything in stride. And what helped me be less of a bundle of stress as the event go on, as you guys showed that you could really carry your own, even at the best level, playing against teams like France and Australia. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to being back with all of you guys who are going to come back next year. I'm sure Jeremy feels the same, but he'll get his plan from to say that himself now.
Yeah,
I feel like support staff were like one of the things that I saw teams have, that teams that were running smoothly had more support staff than teams that weren't running smoothly. 100%. And somebody just run and get water for people seemed like such a clutch thing for a lot of teams when I was able to talk to coaches and support staff. Like
it's
that
also
seemed like a
big
deal.
Somebody to shout a ref for you when you're at the one end of the room and the refs from the middle, for someone to just stand with you when like you're like the other team is, like there's like a ref and a captain, and somebody's at the table talking to the guy, like just don't feel like you're on your own. Having coaches do that is super helpful. And then you could be like French and have a guy who's a personal chef making Nutella sandwiches for everybody. And honestly, like envious as all hell.
I definitely was jealous that I couldn't have a goddamn sandwich from that table because they looked delicious.
Should have asked.
I probably could have gotten one if I'd asked. Yes.
When we paired them, I was presented with wine and sausage, which I did absolutely consume the wine of. I will say the one last thing for WTC is that if every day was WTC, I'd be 100. I would be so much skinnier because I don't eat, I stress all day, and I walk 10 miles.
Yep.
I definitely walked so fucking much doing that. I was walking around like just circles, S's really, walking like S's through the entire thing. For the entire break time between rounds where I was talking to coaches, I would make one lap, talk to one set of coaches, turn back, make the other lap, and talk to the other set of coaches, and then do that repeatedly.
Yeah. It was funny. I had been so excited when they changed the pod configuration to actually be a 3x3 of tables rather than the straight row with a pairing table at the end. That I was going to walk less, and my knees were going to be better, and it was going to be so much better because I also had 4 coaches. I ended up walking about, I think it was something like 15 kilometers more this year than I did last year, and I was thinking, oh no, this is going to hurt.
Because all you're doing is you're looping the tables faster,
Which is
bro.
exactly what I was doing. Instead of like bouncing from one end to the other constantly, I was just circling like a shark, waiting for a match to go sideways.
We just kept walking out. It was the walk to the sofas and back for me, mate. It was all it was.
Yeah. Chris, you are more than welcome for the nipple for the charge roll versus Denmark. Your opponent was not happy that I swung by for that one.
All right. I think that is going to do it for
weird
the actual
superstition
WTC
stuff.
coverage. So I am going to very quickly jump the plugs on us, and then we're going to move on to the show questions for probably 15 minutes or so. So we're going to do speed run on the questions because I do at some point would like to get to bed. So the plugs. So hey everybody, if you've listened to literally 100 minutes of Stat Check so far, you're probably enjoying the show. If you're in a position that you'd like to help pay back in any way at all, there's a couple of things you can do. One is chuck a like, a comment, a subscription, or anything of that sort on the YouTube, Twitch, anything like that. It really helps us out with discoverability, with interaction, even just seeing what you guys are saying in the comments, whether it's feedback, whether it's compliments, especially compliments, mostly compliments. Please make it compliments. I really need some right now. Then that would be great. We really do appreciate all of you guys' support on that. Otherwise, if you can, please do check out patreon.com/statcheck. For $5 a month, you can get access to one of the best communities out there in 40K. We had
100%.
something like 60 people at the WTC. It was truly incredible meeting so many people from South Africa, from New Zealand, from America, Canada, from the dregs of England. It was truly wonderful. So many people. Sorry, please.
No, a highlight of my weekend or my week definitely was Liam VSL sneaking up behind me somehow and telling me that he loved our show. And definitely me getting a little spooked by it because I wasn't expecting a 6 foot something odd individual being able to sneak up behind me like that.
The man looms over you.
He definitely, I didn't even have to look up like this. And he kind of just appeared and was like, I love your show in a French accent. And I was like, oh shit.
So yeah, it was truly an honor to meet so many people who had heard of the show, who had been part of the community for a long time that we'd never been able to put a face to a name. Really did enjoy meeting all of you guys there. Otherwise, there are a few other things you can check out. X and One is the other show on this network, is one of the other shows on this network. It's produced by Tim Pinney and Cliff Thomas. They cover all things 40K, being good while also having other life commitments. I'm sure that they will at some point cover doing team-related things in your local community. It's a great show. It's every other week on Thursdays on the same YouTube channel as this. The other show you can check out is a little more sporadic. It's run by Piotr, also and much better known as Typhus of Team Poland, which is covering all things team related. I am sure that most of the WTC post-event analysis dissection that you're looking for will be on End of the Matrix because it is Typhus's baby. Typhus loves. I've never seen a grown man cry so hard and known it meant so much to him than when Typhus's team won the WTC this year, because Typhus put so much work into growing the Polish community and the Polish team over the past few years, and I'm sure he will carry all of that energy forward into the post-analysis of the event and showing just how spectacular the Polish victory was and how well all the other teams prepared this year, because the event is one of the most competitive that we've ever seen for WTC. Every team at the top was fighting, trading blows. No team went undefeated. There were so many teams on 4 wins and a draw, 3 wins and 3 draws, so on and so forth. The scrum from 6th through 12th were all on the same battle points, and it purely came into tiebreakers. End of the Matrix will have so many details on that. Please do check it out. I'm sure we'll cover more of it next week when we have more of the main show back. But End of the Matrix is going to be your one-stop shop for all of that. Couple more things. Please do check out red-dragon.ca. That is our merch partner, or one of our merch partners. They also offer 40K produce, 40K products, and all that sort of thing. If you are a member of the StatCheck Patreon community, you will get access to a discount code for that. I believe it's 15%.
Correct.
Which you'll get access to via the Patreon. Please do check them out. They're also the sponsor for our dice and objective markers. Otherwise, you can check out Saltar Games. They run our Etsy store, which has all kinds of things like tokens and measuring sticks. Did you get all of yours, by the way, Jeremy?
Yes. Cool. AJ from Saltar was incredibly accommodating and super generous. I put in an order for basically one of the 9-inch deep circuit markers and a combat gauge for every single member of the team and the coach as a gift. And then he slapped in a whole bunch of extras that I just was gifting to every single one of my opponents at the War Masters. In other words, it's like, do you have a combat gauge? No, here you go. Stat check on it or salt tire on it.
Perfect.
Yes, definitely check them out.
Yeah, and that's just on Etsy. You just need to search Salt Art Games, it'll pop up. It's the stuff that's called the stat check things. It's not that complicated. Lastly, if you're interested in coaching, please do check out stat-check.com/coaching for myself and Typhus. If you are interested in getting better at 40K, any level, whether you're trying to make your national team, already on your national team, or just interested because you've heard so many great things about being good at Warhammer, I promise you it is the gateway to the most awesome community in 40K. If you'd like any help with that, please do check it out. Myself and Typhus both offer that. We're more than happy to help you out with any questions you have. Otherwise, we're going to move on to show questions for 15-ish minutes so that I can go to bed. And we're going to do that in just a second.
I do want to thank Zaviwa Daddy or Zaviwa Tatoosh or Typhus, whatever you want to call him, for nearly making me cry at the end of the ceremony by crying and then giving me like 50 compliments while hugging me. And definitely me just sitting there like, I can't cry right now, Typhus. Don't do this to me. So thank you, Typhus, for that. That was amazing. But here are show questions for today. I'm going to start with Discord questions, and I'll pop over to some YouTube chat questions if we have time, because there are a few interesting ones in there. One that I want to address because it's about the U.S. team that I think is wrong, but that's okay.
Yep. And remember, we are speedrunning these boys, okay? There are 25 questions in Discord alone. On the way.
I'm actually going to skip a couple of them because some of them we already talked about. Derek asks one that we pretty much covered, which is how much fun did you guys have? And if you have a most memorable moment from WTC, let's just do a memorable moment.
I mean, I'll never forget every night in Bar Popular. That place was absolutely awesome every night. Just
Wild.
Everybody you know at the same bar drinking until like midnight, 3 a.m., whatever. Many great conversations had. And I hear somebody went home in the back of a police car and somebody almost got hit with a chair. So
I did hear about both of those. Yeah.
Yeah. Then definitely the Swedes and their lovely little lemon shot or whatever it was.
Requires maybe some more communication and consent from their Belgian bartender than they anticipated.
Belgian bartender. Yeah. That might be my memorable moment would be Sebastian recounting to me the fact that the Belgian bartender did not appreciate having a lemon wedge flung at his head.
Shocked, truly.
Shocked and awed.
And this being the hotel bar and them just profusely apologizing and disappearing very quickly before they got kicked out of the hotel. Nathan?
Fuck. It's Typhus trying to make me cry at the end of it is basically my most memorable moment. Although also the other most memorable one was Adam Lame of Team England coming up to me and asking me if I wanted to see his algorithm, which was probably the most overt flirting I got all weekend.
Was it a pairings algorithm? Those are banned. Bad, Adam.
It wasn't for pairings, but it was something else. But that's okay.
As long as it wasn't for pairings, I don't have to chase Adam down with a stick and beat him.
No, they're allowed, but not at the table.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. The next one is, was there any secret tech that you thought you missed out on?
All right, I'll admit it here, and this is the only time I'm going to say it, and this was right about the Dark Angels and the Death Watch.
I know. We probably should have had Nids over time. We didn't have anyone to replace the... I was very close to playing Nids for the event before I wanted to swap off a Death Watch for a while, and I went to Nids first before I went to Dark Angels, with the intent being that we would move someone else over to Dark Angel or over to Death Watch. I ended up not wanting to do the that swap on the basis that I still needed a Marine player and I didn't have anyone I was confident in, but I could have had somebody on Nids faster, I think. I wish I had paid more attention to them from the offset. I think that's the one that I was really upset with. I also was very impressed with Chaos Knights over the weekend, more than I thought I would be. They worked very well in pairings as a counter to specifically and exactly GSC. I think you needed one or two more of those. Like, we ended up having a pretty good time into them with the Eldar match that actually they didn't win into the double Wraith Guard and the Deathwing Knights, but having a third would have been nice.
We'll talk about it more on stats, what I think about tech armies in WTC and who made what mistakes and stuff like that. I will tell you that only one team got multiple wins with Tau based on...
Yeah, it was Poland. Yeah.
And it was Poland. And even Poland said that it was a mistake.
Yeah, We did too well with it. We took it out to Poland and accidentally did too well with it, and every team copied us and had regretted it. So Netherlands and Poland both took it as well. And I think all three of us kind of wish we had gone the other direction and taken the NIDS list that Poland did. But it ended up just the NIDS list hadn't had a great success that weekend. So.
I think we'll probably have Pumbaa on like a variety of different shows. I'll probably talk to him on Contact Loss at some point. But I think I remember my drunk conversation with him at the bar after the event. I think he said he just kind of hoped that he'd taken a more like an orcs list is what he was talking about.
Oh yeah, orcs also looked very good. But that's again, orcs kind of fell into that. They're a GSC answer, and like as long as you had like 3, I think you were fine to GSC. We ended up having 2, and it was slightly too awkward.
Right. I'm gonna skip some of these because they're like really long questions. How's everyone feeling emotionally and physically right now? Is from John.
Knackered, elated, and ready for my next tournament. I can't wait to play 40K.
Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. I've now booked in 2 team tournaments in October.
I am hype as fuck to do coverage for somebody else. So if anybody wants to pay me to come out and do coverage for them, I will definitely do it.
You gonna do San Diego?
I mean, if they're willing to do it, I will do it.
I think we could probably make that happen. We've got all that stat check budget sitting around that we're not doing anything with. We should make something happen.
We should send Nathan to the Cali Cup.
I'll do it.
We could probably do that.
I actually am so much more enthused by coverage right now than I am by playing singles, although I am doing an event at the end of September.
You got to stay good at 40K to be at least a little bit good at coverage. Like you got to stay at least a little bit tapped in, knowing what to expect.
That's what you're all here for, right? So I can just get messed up repeatedly in singles somehow.
I like John's second question. Yes, are the top 2 single
I'm
armies
playing in
as
2 GTs basically.
Sorry, did I cut or did Nathan there? Cool. I like John's question. Are the top tier single armies as broken as they appear, or did teams moderate that well? I think GSC got a little bit found out this weekend as having more answers than I think people have anticipated. Eldar are wildly broken. Like wildly beyond repair. That army could lose 700 points out of its list and still be top tier.
Yep, I'd agree with that.
Frank asks what would I run if I had to cut the line from my War Master, if I had to put the line on my War Master's list. I wouldn't. I'm sorry, the Lion is not a good data sheet. He is very fun, and I definitely bought him. But you put the Lion on your list, you are fundamentally playing a different list of what I was playing. I would play maximum lone operative bollocks with like triple Talon Master, 15 Sniper Scouts, and I wouldn't even bother running Death Ring Knights in that list. I'm sorry, it's just not a good combination. There are too many points in one basket. Tips for maximizing the ability of the Death Ring Knight brick: shove it at your opponent. You're not going to try and kill it, because if they try and kill it, they have to come into the open. If they come into the open, your advance and shoot Desolation Marines, rip them to bits. Just make sure that happens, and you'll be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Which country did you not want to play?
Honestly, Italy.
That's fair.
Just because of our history, we were concerned. But I found out after the fact that the Italian captain Danielle had actually come out of retirement to lead the Italian team this year. Right, this is what I had been told through some side channels, and specifically wanted to sit down with the Canadians if we didn't play and mend fences. And I felt like our round against them did that exceptionally well, because we had a very smooth, very good round between the players. There was no real contention. There was no issues. It was just 2 nations playing 8 games of Warhammer into each other. And one very salty Imperial Knight player who felt that he had been bussed by his team into the Custodes on Big L table.
That's fair. We were definitely trying to dodge Poland. Poland had the best read on they were the one team we didn't want to play because they had the best read on us as players, the best read on us as teams. We had prep with Poland almost as hard as we had with Iceland, and it was very nice to follow a separate but also upright path alongside them, watching them do very well with the same team comp we had, while we did very well for us with the same team comp, which was great, because I would have hated to have our run ended by the team that we prep with, because it would have felt like we didn't get to prove ourselves. We just played more into a team that we knew was better than us. Whereas getting to lose to France and Australia was at least hey, this is the things that we can work on, rather than hey, this is a team that's better than you and also knows your shit. So that was nice. Also, not playing England is always great, because England is right there and we always play England. So it's nice to play against different people. Although playing Ireland was close enough to playing another home nations team never feels great. What was your hardest match over the weekend?
Germany. No question about that. War Masters would have been round 3 of the Custodes. Scrambler Fields Ritual. don't really know how to play that round better.
Battle ready standards were my nemesis for the weekend.
That's fair. France was definitely our toughest round. Like I know we were actually Australia's smallest win, which we were quite happy with. We definitely gave them a good fight. They had to push into us to try and get into the win territory, and there was a path to a draw there. But France was just we felt a little bit outclassed. A lot more than the Australia round. It was a lot more hopeless. For the War Masters, it was definitely my gaming in Sacco on the French stream. The man played absolutely impeccably. We had a very, very good, very clean game with a lot of sportsmanship on both sides. I made a couple of mistakes. He made a couple of mistakes. Like it was a lot of passing the torch back and forth on, no, it's fine, just fix it. And we managed to scrape our way to a draw and putting both to the shadow round, which was like the best outcome for both of us and the worst outcome for both of our sleep. So I was quite happy with that. But definitely a game. Sacco is an absolute gentleman. I really hope if I can't win LGC this year, I hope it's him that does it on the repeat.
Right.
What's everyone's 4K plans until the data slate?
I have a GT in September, and I'm running an RTT in September in like August or whatever. I don't know.
I'm going to Capital City Bloodbath on Saturday, most likely.
Yeah, I have like 2 or 3
which might be a massive mistake, but
I'm gonna hit things with some form of models. I don't know. I've played like 80 games of Space Marines now. I'm kind of ready to move on to something else.
Let's go play Tyranids.
I'm considering it, but I don't have what I need. I'm like 3 Molochs and 2 Dragons short of what I want to play for Tyranids, which is Alex Engels' singles list.
It was a very fun list to watch.
Very fun. Not exactly, but very similar to it. I would have to do a lot of work for NIDS, and I kind of don't want to buy NID stuff until the Codex comes out. So I'm a little bit in a holding pattern with them. So I don't know. I might try Harp's Great Ice List because it did look fun, even if I still don't understand it or think it's very good.
I guess I was going to think about playing Tyranids as well, but I don't know if I will. I'll probably just play Eldar if they don't get hit too hard in the slate in early mid-September. Look, I want to win something every now and then, at least to make people think that I'm good at 40k occasionally. Maybe.
What's everyone's hope for the data slate? Eldar in the bin, Genestealers down a little bit, Marines toned down on Oath, but improved in every other way.
Yep.
Custodes and
Thralls gutted, hopefully. That's the only thing I want to change with Necrons. I think the only thing I think that really needs to change with them right now.
I think the Catan should probably not be able to have Sempiternal Weave.
100% it shouldn't. Or it needs to be way more expensive.
Yeah, that's like it's just not fun to play against.
It's sub 300 points for something that's half damage with a 4-up Feel No Pain that can teleport on advancing and stuff like that. It's too good for its points.
Yeah, that's fair. All right. I want to ask this one because it's something that people are laughing at, but I think actually can happen. Will North America start to adopt WTC terrain as a standard? What can we do to show support for the format? I mean, my local has already 100% embraced WTC terrain. And when they found out that Bloodbath was not moving to WTC terrain, that actually drove some people away from the event. To the point where when I agreed to run the doubles event, I arranged to borrow 8 tables of WTC terrain that we would just play the doubles on. Because again, it was, when people found that out, they're much happier. Similarly, Riley has gone out west and is basically trying to make sure that they all run WTC terrain as well. Because the fundamental thing is that WTC listens to feedback, which means that if a terrain set or a terrain layout isn't working, they'll change it and they'll update it. Not too dissimilar from what the UKTC does, where Zach listens to feedback. Neil Tom.
The real answer is support events that have WTC terrain, except that they might be a little more expensive on the first outing because they're having to buy the terrain. Yeah, put your money where your mouth is. If people are running a WTC event, make the effort to go.
Yeah,
100%.
That. There's a question in YouTube chat that I just want to answer because I think it's just wrong. And I'm going to answer it for Anthony, which I think is amusing, which is talking about the U.S. team shoving single players in a trench coat and managing to get second, which I think is a gross mischaracterization of how the U.S. team was managed this year. That team, in fact, didn't bring several top singles players on purpose because they didn't buy into the team system, is my understanding. So
I heard similar. Not only that,
Yeah,
but they
Team
had
America were wonderful this year. Leave them alone. They deserve everything they earned, and I'm so glad they didn't win.
That was generally the consensus that I got, is that everybody was happy they changed the way that they were managing their team's philosophy, but we're
didn't
also
want them to
happy
win.
they didn't win.
I'm happy with America coming second every year from now until the end of time. But if they ever
no.
win, I can't handle it.
When they have one.
I mean, the thing that I got was it was anyone but England, but that also meant anyone but the USA.
It's Anthony spent a year working on the America's reputation for anyone but England and probably the USA. Like, if I had to choose between the two, I would have picked the USA.
Yeah.
But if it could be neither, I would die happy.
Yeah.
I would also say that I absolutely love everybody on Team England. Every single person who plays for Team England, I adore, with the possible exception of Nassim. However, I will die before I would ever be happy that Team England won. Team England, the institution, is a mortal enemy.
They were one of the jerseys that I most wanted because they put up with me the most over the week. To be fair,
it's because you were attached to Nathan at the hip.
Yeah, but Nathan was also amazing. We
Nathan
became
was wonderful.
We became best buds almost instantaneously.
That's cute.
It was. We basically looked at each other and were like, "We're Nathans. We're friends. Congratulations."
Entirely reasonable. Okay, very quickly moving on. Favorite food or drink you had?
There was this pizza piz stuff, which was like hot honey that you put on pizzas at the event. So it was like honey with chili in it. That was good on everything that I put it on. Fries were also delicious. I'm sorry, folks, but because I was staff, they fed me, so I didn't get to go to a lot of places. Although I will say I almost cried also a different time when I went out with Team Canada for dinner once, because it was the first real food I had taken, because right before WTC, and what almost caused me to maybe not be able to make it was I got 2 of my teeth removed by a dentist. So the first solid food that I'd eaten in quite a while was actually with Team Canada, and it was delicious Italian food, and I almost wept at the table basically then and there as well.
We had, I believe our nights were like, the first night we went for a nice brewery dinner where I had ribs, then the next night we had steak, and then I had no tacos. And
oh no!
So was that your Otacos receipt, by the way, that's circulating?
No, that was Jonathan's. My Otaco's order was significantly more messed up because he had a medium and I did not. I paid €18 for like a taco filled with like chicken breast and bacon and cheese and like a Powerade to wash it down with. It was it was the most incredible. It's just like a taco wrap stuffed with meat and cheese, and it was the best.
Taco is correct in quotation marks from
exactly.
From
Steak night was great. The ribs were great. I'm gonna be honest, the Sunday night McDonald's kind of hit the spot in the right way though, where we were like just putting something in our body so we could go and drink until 3 a.m. We were like, we'll go to the steak place that we went to last year where we're counting. We did not make it to the steak place. Like we were like, there's a McDonald's 150 meters away, and then vodka, and then quad vodkas is a thing. So
yeah, for us, it was always the comfort food that is capsalon. Any locals will know exactly what I'm talking about with that. For anyone who has not indulged in this Low Country's delicacy, it is fries, shawarma or kebab meat, cheese, baked, and then with veg on top.
Put the veg on top at that point. Like, just stop.
The veg on top actually adds a nice amount of flavor to it, so I actually like it.
There was one other thing that I wanted to say.
It was very funny because after our first night at the kebab place, because it was after round 1 of the WTC, which was finished at 10 o'clock. Please don't do that again.
Oh yeah, you guys made it exactly as far as the first food place after the venue every night. We'd walk past you on our way to like Cookmazi in the town center or something like that, where 400 people would order like the same thing and they would bring it out in the wrong order. And you guys would always just be like in the first one. Like you couldn't make it like another 50 meters to all of the other places.
Didn't care. It worked. Great. The food was good. But there was definitely a moment of the second time we went there, Kier, our orc player, just looked at me and said, "What was that thing with the fries you got? Because it looked amazing." And I was like, "Just this. Just order this."
All right, moving on. What do you think WC needs to do for next year to improve? I think timings for the Thursday could have been better. Finishing at 10 did suck, as Jeremy said. I don't think the singles needs to be... I think the singles round could probably be after the first round of the finals or the first round of the main event. Just like have it be have that be the one that finishes at 10, so it's one person sticking around late. I get giving people time to get in and stuff like that, but I think that the order was a little out of whack there. It also has the finals at like a time that like the US and stuff can watch, which helps a bunch. And then, as we spoke, the round time on the Sunday, where we only got an hour for lunch, was probably the only other thing that I was really upset with. On a personal note, the captain's block had way less cool shit in it this year, but I get that was like sponsorship stuff. We got like koi opens and all that, and like little widgets and stuff last year, like base markers and stuff like that. And it was cool. We got some stuff, but it would have been nice to have like a couple of extra things in there because that box was like Christmas Day last year, and this year it was a box with our name cards in it. But I understand that that's all like supplemental to the main event and not something that I'm really complaining about. It was just like I was looking forward to this. I still kept the box because the box is cool. Anything else? It would have been nice to have a little bit of dedicated practice space on the Wednesday and Thursday when people weren't playing games specifically, so that like people who were just there for the team event could actually get some games in prep. That's always been a thing at WTC, and it was a little awkward that there weren't any this year, and you had to wait for like singles tables to finish, or to not be in use for people dropping. I don't think that was perfect, but again, it's if the singles event's going to be significantly bigger than the event, that's not a thing that you can guarantee anymore.
Yeah.
But it would have been nice to have.
On Thursday, there was dedicated practice space from 1 to basically 4
Until
or 5.
4, yeah. It's not.
It wasn't ideal. It would have been nice if we'd been able to get into the hall earlier in the day, but I also understand why we weren't allowed into the hall until earlier because they wanted to make sure everything was set up. But it's definitely
for sure. But it's definitely some stuff that I would have liked to see be like some stuff that would have made our experience as the team easier. I don't know how that would impact on the organizers because that's not the side of things that we're looking at this from. On the stream side of things, I definitely think it would have been cooler to see a little more integration between the Wargames Live and the Contact Lost stuff for the English language stream, having those two be like a combined, like joint, like have WTC stream like the Wargames Live output with Contact Lost, like in between games and stuff like that. I think that would have been a better way to do it.
On that,
but I don't know what the discussion was there, and Nathan will know more about that than I will.
On that, what I'll tell you is that I talked to Joe as we were breaking down, and we kind of like stood there and chatted for a little bit. And it just basically was us. And so like streaming is hard to do at the best of times, but we hadn't had as much planning time with Wargames Live as we probably should have had. Just because of scheduling and because one set of us is in Poland and one set of us is not. But for next year, if Wargames Live comes again, we already talked about integrating our two streams completely so that we'll have more stuff going on. So me and Joe already talked about that as a weakness. And talked about how we can do it better for next year so that we can have games commentary from Adam commentary and Joe, and then between rounds just have us on as well for the other end of it. And like that will improve things significantly. But so we've talked about it, and that's already on the docket as an improvement.
Yep. Any scandalous stories people may not be aware of? No, we generally prefer not to cover the scandalous side of things. We try to be positive about the event. There also wasn't a ton this year, and none of it was super interesting. Like nobody was throwing models at people. Like the Scandinavians, one of them went home in a police car on the last night, and nobody knows why. It was drink. It was obviously drink.
And it wasn't last night. I'm pretty sure it was on the Wednesday night.
It wasn't, and it was actually just policemen nicely taking them home. Basically, that was all it was.
Yeah, Sebastian got a taxi ride home for free.
So you're not even like remotely leaning into the we're starting rumor segments. Like, come on.
No, we're not.
I heard
James
Ramsey punched a guy. Like, come on.
Can I give you a much? I'm going to give you a much better and funnier story from staff dinner instead. How about that? So on the last staff dinner, we were all sitting down, and it's me, TJ, and like 20 European staff who were helping for the weekend, basically the week. And Adam Camilleri whips out his fucking phone, puts the volume at maximum, and hits play, and Country Road starts playing, and the whole staff table starts singing, including me and TJ, basically, because we decided we might as well join in Country Road at the top of their lungs. Of the like 20 some odd people at the table, two of us have been to Virginia. And I don't know why anyone else would know about this song and know the lyrics to it and be able to sing it.
It was in Kingsman too.
Sure.
It's true.
But it definitely was eerie and kind of fun and kind of weird all at the same time. So there's your funny story from WTC.
Okay. Have you all noticed the general vibe / notoriety / prestige of WTC increasing and changing over time? This is the most I've been aware of it / update on WTC stuff, but that's because I've been on the StatCheck Discord. Yeah, first of all, if you want to know about WTC, be in the StatCheck Discord. It's a great place to catch literally every update, literally all the time, up to and including me shitting the bed over who we've bared or things like that. It's great.
Yep. I will say from talking to Neil, all of the streams were breaking all-time records constantly throughout the week. So there's definitely a ton of eyeballs on WTC as compared to last year. But yeah, it's definitely growing. It's definitely gaining popularity and variety. I expect selection for a lot of teams this year to be absolutely insane.
It's also amazing.
Yeah, I'm very much hoping we get a bunch more applicants this year. Even if we don't end up taking them, it's still cool to have more people interacting and pushing everybody, because having a strong base of players to pick from pushes everybody to play better so that they keep their spot or to
People don't
take
want to
their
get
spot.
complacent when someone can replace them.
WTC is amazing. 12 out of 10, best 40K experience I've ever had in my entire life. There you go. It's my
Can we call
review
it there.
Actually, yeah, let's call it there. I hope everybody has a wonderful evening. You're all amazing and beautiful
We
people.
had one more question that I actually did say that we would
No.
touch on very quickly. Give
I
me 1 second.
refuse.
I'm doing
God
it.
damn it.
So somebody said
No.
something about how do you push people to do more team events because their state is, they look at the WTC and said they want to try and do a bunch. The real answer is to just run them at the size that your community can accommodate. Yes, 8-man teams is great. Yes, 5-man teams is the first time where pairings really starts to matter. If your team can get 3 and 4 mans off the ground consistently, it's significantly more important for making your community actually care about it. Make it a big event. Make it something that people like care about. Run it in a cool place. Don't just run it in like the local stores or all that. If you can do it, run it. Make it a feature. Make it an event. Make it something that stands out, and people will enjoy it and people will want to come back. That's the real big one. It doesn't matter if it's 3 mans. It doesn't matter if it's 8 mans. If you can only do 10 player, like 10 teams doing 3 mans, that's the same event, same number of people as a local GT. You can run that event. Anybody can run that event, and it's the first step on making people care.
The sweet spot is 4-man teams because you can easily fit 4 people, armies, and luggage in a single car in America. Since this is for Montana, people tend to be fairly spread out. It's a lot easier to get a group of a carload of buddies to an event. Having consistent terrain, having decent organization, and having at least one TO who knows their rules and knows what's happening is going to be really important. But really what it comes down to is hop onto the StatCheck Discord, hop on our Patreon and ask us. We have everything that we could possibly lend you. Check out the WTC, how they do things. The teams events are actually a lot easier to run than you may think, and they're wildly more popular than singles events are once people start experiencing them.
Definitely.
Yeah, once you get it started, the snowball effect is insane.
Yep. Definitely slide into our DMs and see if we can help you in some way promote your event as well. Like we'll help you out if you want help running teams events. I personally will help you out if I can.
Same here. More than happy to.
Other than that, we're really sorry, guys. We have run 45 minutes over schedule. I know we said we would, but there have been a ton of questions this week, and we're going to continue our WC coverage into next week. So if you had one of the questions that you asked in the chat this week, do chuck us in a DM, get it in the chat next week, or drop it in the Discord, patreon.com/statcheck. We'll be more than happy to do our best to get through as many as we can. Unfortunately, this is a show that I record at 11 o'clock at night, and I do have a bedtime. So thank you so much, everyone, for being with us this week. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll be back with you live at 11 p.m. standard next Tuesday. That's the words. I'm sorry, guys. We'll be back with you live 11 p.m. next Tuesday for the UK, various times across the globe for everyone else. Please do check out patreon.com/statcheck, youtube.com/c/statcheck, and statcheck.com/coaching for all of the various things that we do. Thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. Thank you so much for allowing us to send Nathan to the WTC to do coverage. It's one of the things that I'm the proudest of being able to do as part of StatCheck. We love you all. Thank you. Good luck at any tournaments this weekend, and goodbye.
Bye-bye.